like this, and a green light will come on.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. The June 17th Board of Education meeting is now in session. Please rise for the invocation. O God, we pray to administer that which is just in all educational policies, being ever mindful of your guidance, stir us to action with love, wisdom, and understanding. The pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before I continue, I just want to say a very warm welcome to our 3 new board members. We have Allison, Frank, Tom, and Julie. Oh, everybody's over here. I'm sorry, Teresa. I'm not used to Teresa being over here.
No, it's really weird.
And Aisha is on vacation today, which would have been her last day in Tennessee. So so we will have our new student member when we get together again in July. Item 2.03 is the minutes of the Board of Education meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? You're in favor? Motion passes 8-0-0. Item 2.04, establish agenda order. Mrs. Nally.
I move that the board take item 5.01, administrative personnel appointments, out of order and consider the item immediately after public comment.
Second.
All those in favor? Motion passes 8-0-0. Item 2.05, board recognitions. We do not have any board recognitions for today. Item 2.06, school and community highlights. And I don't see any lights going on. Because, oh, Mrs. Birch.
I just quickly want to wish all the fathers and grandfathers and surrogate fathers and placeholder fathers a happy Father's Day on Sunday.
Mrs. Ritchie?
It's not really a community highlight. It's just one to, we only have 2 days left of school. I know that there's a lot of people that are jumping up and down for joy, and they're not all children. So just to say to our teachers and to all our employees again, another thankful, great year that we had. Thank you very much. Enjoy your very brief summer, because it will seem like it just goes by in no time at all. And to all the children, to stay safe and have a good summer, but continue to read.
Dr. Frick?
Good morning. I just would like to say thank you to the Commission of Anne Arundel County that vetted the process that allowed my name to go forward to the governor of the state of Maryland, and thank the governor for forwarding my name so that I could be on the school board. I'm used to sitting out there in the audience, and I would like to remind all of you out there that I'm the proud father of 2 children that graduated from Arundel High School, and not only Arundel High School, but one of them went on to graduate from the University of Indiana, where I went to school. My daughter decided she would graduate from the University of Michigan, so I know that this is a great school system, and I'm glad to be here, and I want to hear from you, and I'm going to give you publicly my home phone number. My home phone number is 301-261-6181. I want to hear from you if you work for the school system. If you're a taxpayer in this county, I'm here for you. Thank you.
Dr. Alato?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I want to congratulate all of our recent graduates. We went through all of our graduations this year, and they were wonderfully planned and executed, and great celebrations of all the hard work over the many, many years that our students have been with us. They were a lot of fun, and I very much appreciate each of our board members taking time out of your busy schedules to join us for those celebrations. Also, and lastly, I had a wonderful opportunity this past Friday night to join a group at Meade Middle School Friday evening, where there was a celebration of two mentoring programs that we have going throughout a number of our schools, and that's our Yes mentoring program for our male students, and the Gems and Jewels, which is a mentoring program for our female students, and it's coordinated through Reverend Menendez, and Cheryl Menendez, and she just does a fabulous job. It's a wonderful celebration, a fabulous dinner, and some great entertainment performed by the students. So it was a wonderful celebration of their mentoring program through this past year. I was glad to be there. Thank you.
Item 2.07, the PTA report.
Good morning, President Korbalak, Vice President Nally, Dr. Alato, and members of the board. For the record, I'm Pam Bukowski, President of the Anne Arundel County Council of PTAs. On behalf of the council, I would like to congratulate and welcome Mrs. Hummer, Mrs. Picard, and Dr. Frank to seats on the board. I think perhaps the phrase "hit the ground running" probably has taken on increased urgency and intensity for you. We would like to thank Ms. Chaudhry for her year of service, having been an extraordinary representative and role model for the 79,000 students of Anne Arundel County. She has possessed maturity, intelligence, integrity, and poise not often yet found in high school seniors. We wish her luck in her future academic pursuits. Finally, we wish to thank former board member and policy committee chair Mr. Jackson for his commitment and service to Anne Arundel County Public Schools during his term on the board. It hardly seems possible that our school year has come to an end, today for 8 schools, tomorrow for everyone else, and yet the work continues for our PTA Council as it does for this board and many others in the school system. Since my last report, we have had the opportunity to present scholarships to 2 gifted seniors, Sarah Crisp of Old Mill High School and Elizabeth Young of Chesapeake High School. Several of our board members were available to help set up and then stay to enjoy the annual volunteer recognition tea. And last night, the school board nominating commission met to listen to and question 3 qualified and capable candidates for the District 30 seat, including incumbent Mr. Webb. Tonight, the commission also meets to begin the process for the candidates for District 31 seat, one being incumbent Mrs. Ritchie. While the number of candidates may pale in comparison to the combined 30-plus candidates interviewed for 2 seats this winter, the responsibility of the commission to act with due diligence is in no way diminished. Looking ahead, PTA will be represented at the 2015 National PTA Convention and Exhibition in Charlotte, North Carolina, June 25th to 28th. The theme is Moving PTA Forward, and featured speakers include educator and author Dr. Steve Perry and the 2015 National Teacher of the Year, Shauna Peoples. The convention will provide a variety of networking and learning opportunities. Maryland PTA will celebrate 100 years of service to the children and youth of Maryland at their annual convention, beginning with the pre-session Emerging Minority Leaders Conference scheduled for July 16th, and then the convention on July 17th and 18th at the Crowne Plaza Hotel in Rockville. With over 20 workshops to choose from, there will be many sessions consisting of leadership training and boardsmanship. For our Anne Arundel County PTA leaders, this will be an opportunity to enhance skills to be successful in the respective roles of their PTAs. Throughout the summer, we will be offering additional training opportunities at the council level to address leadership, financial responsibility, audits, and other supports as necessary. As a board, we are beginning to plan and setting our initiatives for the 2015-16 school year. Our priority is parent engagement and involvement. We thank the board for recent opportunities for participation and collaboration. As always, PTA speaks for every child with one voice. Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is public comment. Anyone wishing to speak on an item not on today's agenda may offer testimony during this public comment portion of the meeting. Speakers will be allotted 3 minutes each, and the board asks that comments remain civil and appropriate for the various audiences that may be viewing or watching this meeting. Student-specific and personnel matters are confidential and cannot be discussed in this forum. This time is intended for speakers to voice their opinion and not necessarily as a question and answer period. Speakers may pose questions, but answers will be counted toward the 3-minute allotment. For the record, when you come up, please give your name before speaking, and handouts should be given to our board assistant. I have several cards for public comment that are non-budget related, and then I have some cards that are budget related, so we will save the budget related cards for that portion of the meeting. Would Gina Hunt, Christine Joswick, Peter Seabrook, and Jonathan Boniface come up? Yes. Just introduce yourself for us. Thanks.
My name is Christine Joswick, and I am here today speaking on behalf of concerned parents from Cape St. Clair Elementary School. The Board of Education's recent staffing allocation for the upcoming school year reduces the number of fourth grade teachers in our school from 4 down to 3. Based on current enrollment, that means we will have a student-teacher ratio of at least 32-1. Before I go back to the speech that I already had prepared, I want to speak briefly about something that I learned very late last night or early this morning. I was looking at the Board of Education's website, and I found the YouTube video from the past meeting where the parents from Shadyside Elementary came to you speaking about the same subject. Something that was most interesting to me and to our group was the comments that you all made to those parents. And it seems that everyone agrees that more than 30 students in a class in an elementary school is on the large size, and that you all have asked the county council for 33 additional teachers to address that issue, and the county council did not provide the funding for that. When we first started talking about this as parents and what we should do, we thought we should go to the county council. So I contacted the county council. The county council told me that their hands were tied and that they give you 52% of the budget and you have the money and you can do with it what you want. And so that going to them wouldn't get us anywhere. They said that you would pass the buck, and they were interested to see what would happen if we approached you. We, of course, not knowing any better, believed them, chose not to go to the county council meeting on Monday, and decided to prepare to speak to you. So I prepared this great speech to ask you guys for funding, and then I saw that. So now we don't know what to believe, we don't know where to go, and we don't really know who to address this to. So with that being said, let me go back to the speech that I had already prepared, and maybe you can help us figure out what we need to do. The curriculum has already gotten harder with Common Core and Park, which has dramatically increased the day-to-day demands on our teachers, and now they will have 32 students at a minimum to be responsible for. This puts a tremendous burden on our teachers. They will have to grade more papers, juggle more lesson plans, work even harder to accommodate differentiated learning, and will constantly struggle to create a positive learning environment for all of our children. It is the teacher's responsibility to keep their students focused and on task. They provide instructional support to every one of their students. With the increased student-teacher ratio, that instructional support is limited. The teacher's ability to pinpoint potential problems is reduced because they will have less time to notice. Being a teacher is one of the hardest jobs out there, yet we continue to expect more and more from them and often blame them when our children don't succeed. Our teachers need to be given the tools they need to teach our children effectively. Our school is certainly large enough to accommodate 4 fourth grade classes. Not only do we have the space, but we also have classrooms fully outfitted with the technology our teachers need to be effective. Yet at least one of those classrooms will stay dark next year while we pack 32 students into each classroom and ask our teachers to stretch themselves even thinner than they already are. We are here today to present a petition with 322 signatures requesting that funds be approved to allow for an additional fourth grade teacher. It seems that we are all on the same page with class size. Now we just need to know what we should do to get that accomplished for our school. Thank you for your time. And here's our testimony and petition.
Gina?
My name is Peter, and I am here today because next year I don't want my classroom to be total chaos. On Monday night, I thought I wouldn't come and share my thoughts with you because we are doing lots of fun things during the last week in school. But then I said to myself, would I rather miss a fun activity or would I rather have a total chaotic year next year? I am here today because I'd rather miss the cool project my teacher has set up so that you can listen to me and I won't have total chaos with more than 30 kids in my class. The other day I got bored working on my project. My teacher noticed and came to my desk and checked in with me. She said if you keep working on it won't be boring, and she was right. She got me back on task, and when I was spacing out, annoyed and bored, I don't think she could have done that if there was 30 kids in my class. I don't think she would have even noticed. That's why I'm missing a fun morning in school today, so you'll hear me. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for speaking to us, Pierre.
You're welcome.
Gina?
Good morning, board members. My name is Gina Hunt. I'm the parent of Victoria Hunt, goes to school with Peter. And I represent Victoria and the third grade parents that I've talked to, 100% of which are opposed to losing a teacher. I think it's important to note when this class came into Cape St. Clair, they started with 5 kindergarten teachers, and then they went down to 4 when they went to first grade, second, and third. And now we're talking about taking them down to 3. We haven't lost students. In fact, I mean, as you know, Anne Arundel County is growing. There's the estimate of getting, another 50 students or something, and that I can't remember the numbers. You have all the data in front of you, but we're getting more students in. And we're talking about at least 32 kids in this classroom. As you said, we have 322 signatures on a petition. We also have some other parents here in the audience, if I could ask them just to stand up because not everybody is speaking. We didn't want to take your time and have all of us say the same thing, and I'm sure we would have had more parents if it was an evening meeting. I think we all agree the decision's going to harm our children's performance in school if we drop 2-3 teachers. Victoria was principal's honor roll all year this year, clearly something I'm pretty proud of. But I don't think she's going to be able to do that next year with 3 teachers. Her teacher was very good with her this year. I remember my parent-teacher conference where she actually told me, she goes, I get Victoria. Well, thank goodness, because sometimes I don't. And she was able to really direct her in ways that boosted Victoria's confidence, and she got these straight A's. I think with, a teacher to student ratio that we're talking about here, the teacher's only going to be able to focus on those kids that struggle. The struggling, obviously struggling, and things like Victoria getting B's is just not going to come to any focus. Victoria doesn't want to be on a roll. She wants to be principal's on a roll. I know you have these budget decisions, and we're not really clear where this comes into your purview as far as what you can change and what you cannot. And budget decisions are hard. I understand that. There's a give and take. But I just urge you to reconsider this one because this is a class that went from 5 to 4 to 3, and the kids deserve better. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Arlotto?
You picked the right venue, so I'm glad you came in to talk with us. You picked the right venue, but you also, and we'll talk in a second about the county council and their involvement. Peter, awesome, right? So that was awesome, and so thanks for being here. And you need to go back to school so you're not missing all the fun stuff today. Okay, you don't need to be here. You need to be at school where the fun stuff is. Okay, but this is important, isn't it? Absolutely, it's important. So I'm glad you're here. And this is an important topic. So you watch what was posted from the last meeting and my explanation to to the Shadyside parents, and that stands. So let me sort of go through that again so that everybody here and watching can understand that it is a long process of trying to staff the schools. And there are formulas that we use, and that's where we have to sort of begin the process. Understand first and foremost that the board doesn't make those decisions about how many teachers in individual buildings. That's a decision that the superintendent makes, and I make that based on recommendations from staff. So the board doesn't sit around and debate how many teachers go to Cape St. Clair or Shadyside. That's purely up to the superintendent and my staff. So I want you to understand that first and foremost. That we are at a time period right now where we staff schools based on projections. So everything for Cape St. Clair and all of our schools, we staff them based on projections. They will become live numbers after July 1 because we have to roll everybody up, right? We have to roll the 12th graders out because they graduated, and the kindergartners to first grade and first grade to second grade. So we will do that, literally we'll do that roll up in our computer system after July 1, and then we have what we call live numbers. Now we really know how many kids will actually be at Cape St. Clair in fourth grade or third grade or Shadyside in the kindergarten. At kindergarten is tricky because those students, many of those are new to us, and we're just getting those numbers. So once we get the live numbers, then we'll take some of the staffing that we have remaining and start to redistribute that and distribute that out to schools. So in the past years, we have not, and this is going back to the county council, we've not been staffed above maintenance of effort, which is what the legal requirement is. And so last year, for instance, we've got 1,100 more students in our system this year than we had last year, and we got 0 teachers for enrollment. None. So that means what happens? Class sizes go up. That's just the statistics of it. Class sizes are going up. This year, luckily, we got some more money above maintenance of effort. We're going to be able to put some teachers in classrooms and into and build some more of our programs, and that's really exciting. So the Office of School Performance meets every Friday. Those are all the regional assistant superintendents, and they meet and they literally put up on the screen every elementary school with kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth, and fifth grade. I did that work for a number of years as the associate superintendent and chief school performance officer, and we look at what those live numbers are. We talk to the principals, and if we can add a classroom, we can, depending on the data that we have in hand, and then what staffing we have remaining, we can contribute additional teachers. So the instance of Shadyside, those numbers, we were able to determine what those numbers were, and they got an additional fifth grade teacher this past week. They added one. The Office of School Performance meets every Friday through this process, and they will begin to then distribute the staffing that we have now. It becomes official after the board votes, and we've now got the money from the county council, and we'll begin to distribute that staffing. I can't promise you that Cape St. Clair is going to get an additional fourth grade. I couldn't make that promise. I just want you to know the process that goes through, and it is painstaking, and they literally, Office of School Performance, those folks look at every single school and every single classroom. We have some numbers. We would like to get that classroom below 30, at 30 or less, if we can in the fourth grade, in the fifth grade. I can't promise that that's going to happen at Cape St. Clair, but I wanted you to know the process. Let me finish by saying you need to continue to talk to the county council. This board and this school district, we don't make any money. Right? We have to spend other people's money, the tax dollars. So we get money from the federal government, we get money from the state government, and we get money from our county government. The largest chunk of that comes from the county government. So you'll need to continue to have conversations with the county council and the county executive to fund us, because our enrollments are going up, which is a wonderful thing, because we've got awesome schools, right? We got awesome schools that we need to be able to fund them appropriately and increase staffing. Last year was a difficult year for us because we got 0 teachers for enrollment. We've gotten some this year that we're going to use to then begin to spread out. Thank you.
I also want to add, in fairness to the county council, if they say we gave them positions, it's not our problem. They did this year. We asked them specifically, like, say we wanted one teacher, or we wanted a register at this school and we wanted a technology teacher at that school. We were very kind of specific. They said, look, we'll just give you this pot of positions. You guys figure out where they need to go. But the pot was less than the ask. So they aren't micromanaging where the positions go. That is true. Mr. Boniface.
Good morning, President Korbelak, Vice President Nally, Superintendent Arlotto, and members of the board. My name is Jonathan Boniface, and I'm the lead organizer of Build Crofton High School. First off, I would like to congratulate all 3 new members of the board, at least 2 of which have heard my arguments for Crofton High School many times before. Every summer, I eagerly await the newest release of the AACPS, Educational Facilities Master Plan. I know that may sound pretty pitiful, but every year that Education Facilities Master Plan further strengthens the case for a 13th County Public High School. And every year, the case for Crofton being the location for that school grows. This year's 2015 Facilities Master Plan shows a significant shift in future capacities and utilization projections. This is partly due to the fast-paced growth of West and North County and the booming population of families in Annapolis. This is also due to the more precise data and to more accurately predict the inexact science of demographic projections. Like a hurricane's 5-day cone of uncertainty, you know fairly accurately where the hurricane will be in the next few days, but the range widens significantly the further out you go. 10-year capacity and utilization projections are much the same. 1 to 5 years out, they tend to be fairly accurate, but from 5 to 10 years out, the range becomes much wider and subject to significant shifts. We saw that clearly in the 10-year projections made by MGT in 2006. This week, I emailed every board member here what the 2015 10-year predictions look like, overlaid on a map of our 12 feeder systems. I added information as to the percent of utilization each high school had in those projections and the number of seats over or under capacity. I shaded those over capacity in red. This graphic illustration gives you a quick look, big picture view where the change in high school populations is occurring. That's hard to do when you're thumbing through the 451-page 2015 Educational Facilities Master Plan. Please, if you have not done so already, take a look at those illustrations and ask yourself this. If I place a 1,600-seat Crofton High School on this map and bring the 1,400 Crofton students, 700 each from Arundel and South River High Schools, to fill it, will it solve the capacity problem? I know the answer. And a little over 2 months from now, I firmly believe MGT of America will give you the same answer. Have a wonderful summer, and thank you for all you've done for yet another great school year for our great school system. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any additional completed cards other than budget items. Is there anyone else who wishes to address the board at this time? Okay. The next item is item 5.01, administrative personnel appointments. Dr. Arlotto, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend that the personnel listed on the attached sheet be promoted and or appointed.
All those in favor? Motion passes 800. The next item on the agenda is item 4.01, the fiscal year 2016 operating budget adoption. This is an information to action item. Do I have a motion to move this from information to action? All those in favor? We now have an action item. Dr. Arlotto, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend the approval of the Board of Education fiscal year 2016 operating budget to include internal budget adjustments as approved by the board.
Second.
And we have a staff presentation.
Good morning. For the record, Alex Shaknova, Chief Operating Officer, here to present an overview of agenda item 4.01, which is the adoption of the FY 2016 operating budget. Let me please begin by presenting an overview of the revenue side of the operating budget, and then we'll transition into the expenditure side. So purely in terms of revenue, as the exhibit before you demonstrates, overall, we received an increase in our total operating revenue of approximately $23.3 million, which is a 2.1% year-over-year increase. And I'll walk you through the specifics. So in terms of our revenue that we receive, our operating revenue unrestricted that we receive from our federal government, as we predicted, we will not be receiving any revenue gains, and that's a match from the budget that was approved by the Board of Education. In terms of unrestricted funding that we receive from the state government, as of the adoption of the operating budget on June the 12th by the County Council, we are slated to receive approximately $8.7 million additional in unrestricted funding from the state government. Now, that is an increase of approximately $4.1 million over what was contained in this board's original budget and what was contained when the budget was transmitted to the county executive, because as the board knows, the governor has released 50% of the GCEI funding. So the increase from the $4.7 million number that you had asked for, that was in fact put forward in County Executive Shu's budget and now translated into this County Council adopted budget, is entirely tied to the 50% release of the GCI funding. As of this date, we have received no indication and no word whether there will or won't be any additional action with respect to the remaining 50% of the GCI. Should that come to fruition, certainly we'll bring that to the board and to the county government's attention. On the county government side, our largest funding increase side, the board will recall that in terms of the maintenance of effort requirement, we had asked in total from the county government approximately $39.1 million worth of funding. $11.2 million of that would comport with the state mandated maintenance of effort funding. So the remaining $27.9 million would be funding in excess of maintenance of effort. So that becomes important because, as the board will recall, on May the 1st, when the county executive released his version of the operating budget, the county executive did in fact recommend funding over and above maintenance of effort. And as the board recalls, that was principally tied to the expansion of the county's wide area network infrastructure. When the county council took up our budget, at the conclusion of the county executive's recommendation, the county council took actions that would raise the funding of the school district from county sources from the approximately $12 million level that the county executive had recommended up to a new level of approximately $17.1 million. And again, we'll go into the details of the expense side. This is certainly only on the county side. The county council concurred with our utilization of fund balance, the reduction of $7.5 million from the former level of $20 million down to $12.5 million. That's as expected. And then the rest of our budget in restricted category transpired exactly in the manner that you had requested. So we do anticipate about a $1.2 million increase in restricted grant funding, an increase of $2.4 million in our internal service fund for healthcare, and an increase of approximately $1.4 million in our food and nutrition services special revenue fund. So that gets us to the approximately $23.3 million increase on the revenue side. So if you can indulge me, I'd like to now transition from the revenue side of the ledger to the expenditure side of the ledger, which is on the bottom half of that exhibit before you and the one that's before the audience. So in terms of the budget that we requested, when this Board of Education adopted its budget and transferred it to the county government for their consideration, first to the county executive and then to the county council, the Board of Education asked for approximately $14.6 million in the area of compensation increases. And this would have facilitated a equivalent of either a step increase for those bargaining units eligible for one, or a 2% COLA for the non-represented areas. And again, that would have been on the order of about $14.6 million in terms of a new funding request. When the county executive released his budget on May the 1st, the county executive did in fact put in approximately $5.9 million that at that time would have been equivalent to about a 1% across the board COLA, simply the mathematical equivalent of that. Certainly, everybody knows that the county executive nor the county council can prescriptively dictate compensation. Those are terms of employment and negotiation issues for you. When the county council took up the county executive's recommendation, the county council, through their actions, added an additional approximately $1.3 million to the compensation category, and that was by way of a commensurate dollar-for-dollar reduction in the fixed charges or the healthcare area of our budget. That was transferred out of that fixed charges category and over to the compensation category. So as it stands, in terms of that compensation element, there's approximately $7.2 million that's available for this Board of Education and its superintendent and its bargaining units to decide what the distribution of that is going to be ultimately as a result of your negotiations and decisions you make for the non-represented areas. So going down the expense side of the budget, the additions were a $2.7 million, almost $2.8 million increase for the state mandated teacher pension shift. That was fully complied with. So in terms of the mandate for teacher pension shift and the mandate for the maintenance of effort, again, I want to leave no question unanswered that they were both fully complied with. So there's no discussion with respect to compliance with state requirements as this budget is deliberated. Going down the expense side, thankfully, after much deliberation, and maybe this is almost a point to sort of take a little bit of a side note, this county council debated and deliberated 218 amendments over the course of many, many days of heavy lifting. So you think the task before you today is tough. They waded through 218 very difficult and complicated amendments. But one of those was to add the full funding required to support our schools of choice with respect to our contract and charter schools. So the $3.7 million funding that was added to the budget through an amendment by the county council fully funds the expansion of the Monarch Contract School out in Laurel. So they'll be able to increase, add their new 6th grade, plus increase the total head count within their school. And then it's also important to note that remember that as our budget grows, all of our charter and contract school will get a proportionate or commensurate share of that as well. So this demonstrates a tremendous level of support for those schools of choice options, both the contract and charter schools. Going down, when the county executive approved his budget, he had included a recommendation for support of the 2 American Sign Language interpreters. Remember, that was at no cost because that was simply trading contractual services for fixed positions. The county council concurred with that. There was a similar 12 positions tied into the non-public arena, specific with our High Roads Academy program. And again, that was a shift from an external contractual method of delivering those instructional services to self-performing those, again, at no net increase to the public. The county council concurred with that. There was an increase associated with the transportation, routing, and contractual software acquisition, both for the routing and the payment software. The county council, through an amendment, added the 1 position and the $738,600 for funding. The county executive brought down a supplemental budget request and recommended the approval of this. The county council concurred with that action. So in the final decision that was handed down from the county council, the full funding requirement for the routing and the contractor pay and the 1 computer analyst to run that software was included. Going down the rest of the expenditure side then, the county council did, by way of amendment, add in $602,200 to facilitate a possible school start time shift on a moving forward basis. And then finally, as I believe Dr. Lotto and Ms. Quarter-Burlack alluded to earlier in today's meeting, the County Council did in fact go ahead and support the 55.5 additional positions to support the achievement of students here in Anne Arundel County. So in totality, on a position side, this Board of Education forwarded a budget to the county executive that ultimately was approved by the County Council just on the 12th of June. Your budget asked for 133.8 positions overall. As we stand today, 70.5 of those positions have been accounted for. And at the bottom line, as I alluded to earlier, your official request was for a 3.8% year-over-year increase. The request that was approved just late last week was for 2.19%. So the next important matter then really centers around the recommended distribution of those positions. And so there's an exhibit before you that depicts the recommendation of the superintendent, which essentially centers around the allocation of those 70.5 positions. And so let me go through that in a little bit of a detail. So as the exhibit before you depicts, the county, this Board of Education had asked for 2 American Sign Language interpreters, as I mentioned just moments ago. The county executive concurred with that, and so has the County Council. And Dr. Orlado is recommending that we, in fact, do exactly that and move to bring on those 2 American Sign Language interpreters. The Board of Education requested 3 bilingual facilitators. And so this is going to be a generic statement because remember, both the county executive and county council took a very bold and decisive step of acknowledging your role as the policy setters and Dr. Orlado's role as the chief executive of this organization to be the decision makers with respect to the allocation of the computers, of these positions, I meant to say. So where you'll see there's not an exact number, that is because that power is invested in you. So going down then with the rest of the positions, the superintendent of schools is recommending that of the 3 bilingual facilitator positions originally requested, that at this time we move forward with 0 of them. And it is, however, important to acknowledge that in the budget that was adopted this prior year, the year we're currently in, FY15, the County Council did in fact put in funding for additional bilingual facilitators, and this Board of Education, when it adopted its budget June a year ago, almost to the day, did in fact add the 3 additional bilingual facilitators. So the number of bilingual facilitators is already up this year over what it had been in prior years. This simply does not increase that number again in the year ahead. In the area of early childhood literacy, which is centered around the expansion of pre-K, the superintendent's budget included a request for 12 positions. The superintendent's recommending at this time that 8 of those positions to expand our pre-K to an additional 4 schools be acted upon. We had requested 1 position to support our ability to compliance efforts with the EEO and ADA regulations. At this time, the superintendent's recommending that that position not be filled. In the area of early language acquisition instructors and our staffing at our International Student Services Office, the Board of Education's budget recommended that 10 positions be allocated. The superintendent's recommending that 4 of those positions be allocated at this time, with those positions focusing on the early language acquisition. And let me juxtapose that just slightly to what we spoke about earlier. The bilingual facilitators, while they do interact with our youngsters to some extent each and every day, and they certainly do, that is focused, if not as much, but possibly more, on the family unit, the parents, the guardians, the larger community as a whole. So this recommendation by the superintendent sort of mirrors the actions that we took last year, but now we're focusing on the youngsters. So we are putting in those ELA teachers into the classroom. 3 of those 4 would go into the classroom for direct services to the youngsters. And the 4th position would augment our staffing at our ISSO office to help us continue to properly assess and onboard the new families that are arriving into our district on a daily basis that require the services of the ISSO office. So 4 to 10 positions will be allocated in that manner. In the area of the superintendent's EEE initiative, the Enhancing Elementary Excellence, you'll see on the left side of the column that the board had asked for support for funding and positions to support the expansion of the EEE initiative to 4 feeder zones across the school district. At this time, the superintendent is recommending that this Board of Education support his initiative to fully deploy the EEE initiative to the Meade High School feeder zone. That requires 13 positions. To the North County feeder zone to fill that out at 3.5 positions, and to initiate fully that initiative in the Southern Feeder District, 4.5 positions. So of the 4 feeder districts that we started out discussions with when the superintendent delivered his budget message to his Board of Education in December, you'll see that the Chesapeake High School District is not recommended for advancing at this point in time. Certainly, not being bold enough to speak for the superintendent, he remains fully committed, and with the emphasis on fully committed, to rolling out the EEE initiative countywide, much as the data and the evidence has already shown in North County. So I am certain that the Chesapeake District will be part and parcel of discussions that he will have with this Board of Education in the year ahead as we formulate our 17 budget. Continuing on then with the superintendent's recommendation, we'd ask for 1 position to augment the development of some of the curriculum elements associated with our elementary education offerings, as well as to support the curricula elements of our EEE program. Superintendent's recommended we not move forward with that position at this one time. Similarly, in recognition of the high student mobility rate, much of it attributed to not only to growth, but more so the mobility rate of the student population at Meade, given the unique characteristics and the troop rotations at Meade. We had sought to move supply 1 additional registrar at Meade High School. We are recommending that not be acted upon at this time, although the superintendent has indicated that he will continue to work with staff here at central office to identify ways to continue to support Meade High School in that recognition of their higher than or atypical high population turnover in terms of their student body. In the area of PVA expansion, we had requested 6 positions to support our middle and high school PVA offerings. The superintendent's recommending that we utilize 2 of the positions to support that endeavor. For PYP, our primary year program, we currently have 8 schools that have PYP offerings. Our strategic plan says that we ultimately want to have 12. So we'd ask for 1 position in the current budget year to expand our PYP offerings from 8 to 10, which is what our strategic plan calls for in this incremental rollout fashion. And this 1 position that the superintendent is recommending will in fact allow us to roll that PYP initiative out to the 10th school, with the eye in the future of finally being able to bring it out to the 12 that our strategic plan calls for. I already alluded to earlier, so this is just a reiteration of that, in that the non-public shift of 12 positions from contract funded to self-performance, the 12 positions that you asked for were in fact favorably recommended by the county executive and the county council, and the superintendent urges you to acknowledge that as well. In terms of special ed staffing, the special education office, based on rising enrollments and in recognition of caseload, had asked for 5 positions, which was included in the Board of Education's request. The superintendent is recommending that one of those positions be allocated at this time. Part and parcel with the superintendent's initiative to continue to focus on early childhood and early childhood literacy in particular, we had requested that 4 additional staffing positions be allocated to the special education department's early childhood literacy and early childhood initiatives, and the superintendent's recommendation would have 2 of those fulfilled. We have a very robust and ever-expanding STEM program here in the county, the middle schools and high school programs, as well as our biomedical allied health program at Glen Burnie High School, and we had asked for 7.8 positions to be allocated towards that initiative. The superintendent is recommending that 6 of those positions be allocated at this point in time, and I want to make a special note that of the 6, with these 6 positions, we would be in a position to launch the STEM middle school program at our 3rd and final school, which would be Central Middle School. This Board of Education will remember that that was actually part of your request and initiative last year, and unfortunately, we were able to move forward with Lindale. We had to put Central Middle School on hold for 1 year. With the adoption of the superintendent's recommendation, we will now be able to support Central Middle School and move forward with that. So Old Mill, to recap, Old Mill in the year ahead will have its full complement. Old Mill will have a 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Lindale, which we started last year with only 6th grade, will be operating in this upcoming school year with a 6th and 7th grade. And Central Middle School will be poised to bring on its first cohort, its new 6th graders, for its program, and hopefully in the years ahead we'll be able to continue filling those out. In terms of teachers for enrollment, in order to mathematically essentially break even with our enrollment growth, the budget that we put forward to the county requested 33 additional positions. The superintendent is recommending that we move forward with 7.5 of those positions at this time for general classroom enrollment growth. Now, I will say the following. While 7.5 looks like a low number in comparison to this request, let me explain to you why this is good news. It is good news for the following reason. We have, and I spoke earlier to the Monarch Contract School, we have a contract with not only Monarch, but we have a contract with our other charter school partners of schools of choice. And had the county council not taken the actions that they did to demonstrate their support for the expansion of our schools of choice, we would have had to fund those schools of choice anyway. So the 7.5 clearly is not what the superintendent or the board had hoped for, but it is a far, and I'll reiterate that, far, far better situation that we found ourselves earlier in the budget season. And again, had it not been for the actions of the county council, we would be having a markedly different discussion here today. So going on, for technology support technicians, in recognition of our ever-expanding footprint in the areas of technology, we requested 3 school-based technology support technicians. The superintendent's recommending we move forward with 1. I alluded to earlier that the county executive, through his supplemental and through adoption of the budget by the county council, they're fully funding the position for the transportation related computer analyst, software technician. The superintendent's recommending we've moved forward with that. The superintendent and the Board of Education had collaborated on requesting 2 additional psychologists so that each and every one of our 12 high schools had a full-time psychologist available added. As you recall, 2 of our schools do not, as we sit here today. Through actions, through support of the budget, the superintendent's recommending that we move forward with that, and we will be resolving that high school psychologist shortfall that we've had for many, many years. And finally, through actions of the board, and you'll find this a little bit odd, but as you recall, when the board adopted its budget, it asked for 2 additional elementary early childhood literacy pre-K positions, and the superintendent's recommending that we not move forward with those. However, as you know, just moments ago, I spoke to the 8 additional staffing positions that the superintendent's recommending we release so we can open up those pre-K programs at 4 of our schools. So in totality, that goes through the distribution of the of those positions. So in summary, where we began with our request, remember our request was approximately $11.2 million over maintenance of effort, and the county executive did put forward a budget that not only met but exceeded the state requirement for maintenance of effort, and in fact fully complied with the state mandated teacher pension shift through actions of the county council and much heavy lifting. Remember, I said 218 amendments. I have never seen the council do as much work, as difficult work as they have this year. But through their efforts, they were able to allocate an additional approximately $5 million to the operating budget over and above what the county executive had already recommended. So with that, I'll conclude my remarks and turn it back over, Ms. Korbelak, to you, your colleagues, and the superintendent.
Thank you. Before I take board questions, I just want to address the transportation line item. There's been a lot of discussion over the last 2 weeks about our board's request for the $602,240 in the FY16 budget for school start times, which was funded by the county council. I just wanted to recap for everyone, especially our new board members, the discussion that led to that request. At our February 18th board meeting this year, Mr. Sheknovich indicated that a contract for 1 school bus with fuel costs would be approximately $60,224 a year, and that the board was going to need at least 10 buses for non-public placement if we were to shift start times by 30 minutes. He also shared that orders for buses would be due in February of 2016 for an August 2016 delivery, and that the money for those buses had to be on the books at the time we would place that order in February, even if we don't have to cut the final check for the actual bus contract until July or August of 2016. So in other words, if we wanted to change start times in August of 2015, we would have needed to place an order for those buses back in February of this year. We multiplied the 10 non-public placement buses that we were going to need times the $60,224, and that's how we came up with $602,240. So we requested the money so we would have it on the books in February of 2016 for those bus orders. However, our request was not tied to a 30-minute shift or any of the plans that were presented to us at the time. The motion that was ultimately passed by this board, or the former board, I guess, was to add $602,240 allocated in the appropriate state categories to shift current school hours no later than the start of the 2016-17 school year. And it passed 6-0, one being an abstention. Again, the motion did not lay out a specific plan. In fact, there was much discussion to first use the routing software, for which we have now been funded, to look for routing efficiencies and better inform us as to the best course forward. That is the same sentiment echoed by many members of the public before this board, both back in February and at other times throughout last year. I just wanted to make sure everybody was as clear as possible on that before we move forward with other questions. Thanks. Mrs. Burge.
Thank you, Mrs. Korbelak. I do have a few questions. Some are more simple and some are others. When you say that the county executive did exceed the maintenance of effort, that was with his supplemental budget. Is that correct? His original budget exceeded the maintenance of effort by only $59. Is that correct?
Almost. So his original budget exceeded it by $759 plus $750,000, and that was associated with the expansion, our participation in the expansion of the county's wide area network, its infrastructure.
Okay, but that's just sort of a pass-through that we...
It's a very critical pass-through,
Right.
however, because, so it's a utility, and we currently do not have all of our schools, nor do they have, unfortunately, all of their libraries, fire stations, police stations, et cetera, connected to this very robust and sort of target-hardened infrastructure network to support data. And so it is of tremendous benefit, especially as we move into more digital content, more electronic communiques, et cetera, that the county continue to expand their pipelines, underground pipelines, and that as they pass our schools on the way to other county facilities like a fire station, like a library, et cetera, health department facility, aging facility, that our schools also are able to benefit from this. So it is over and above. It is a cost that, you know, we have to bear. But again, it's very beneficial to all of our youngsters to spend, to help and participate with the county in the expansion of their wide area network footprint.
And is that money that's going to stay part of the maintenance of effort formula?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And then, I'm sorry, and then to finish my answer, then yes, and then following the initial release of the county executive's budget, during the budget deliberation process, the county executive brought down a supplemental budget that increased the funding yet again by an additional approximately $738,000 to address the transportation routing and analyst position that Ms. Korbelak just mentioned.
Right, okay. The second question I have is about the teacher pension shift. Isn't this the last year that it's a separate line item in our budget?
Yes, ma'am. So when the law was first passed in Annapolis, it had an extremely prescriptive algorithm that over the course of 4 years, there was an exact number that the county had to contribute to a local board of education, and then there was an exact number that a local board of education had to send to the Maryland state pension system.
Okay.
That 4-year specificity period concludes with FY16. Beginning FY17, the state will calculate what they call the additional normal cost increase in teacher employee pensions. And that number will be calculated by the state. It will be provided to the Board of Education, or each of the Board of Educations here in the state, and the Board of Educations will need to work collaboratively with their county governments to identify a funding mechanism for that.
So there's the possibility that we may not get additional fund increases to pay for any additional costs in the future. Because it will be folded into just our standard costs and could be considered just part of maintenance of effort. And if our costs go up, it could just be considered part of our cost of doing business, and we need to figure it out, just like when costs of fuel go up.
That certainly is a possibility. There are, quite honestly, more unknowns than there are knowns.
Okay.
Because,
but it's a risk.
You know, we knew exactly, everybody, the county government, we knew exactly what was going to happen for 4 years, and now we're transitioning into this land that we've never set foot on yet. So it's going to be a learning experience for all of us. I will say, at best, Ms. Burge, there's probably going to be a lag of a year.
Right.
So, just because of the mechanics of when these numbers are generated, when boards adopt their budgets, when county executives, county councils pass their budget, I think certainly one of the issues is there's going to be a lag between this funding. And again, that's yet again an uncertainty. And I wish I could give you a better answer,
Right.
but I keep coming back to the little word uncertainty.
Right. And I can't say, I'm so pleased that for the first time in the 7 years that I've been on the board, we've been funded above maintenance of effort. It thrills me. I was kind of disappointed that the Cape St. Clair folks aren't here anymore because they were just told, oh, well, we pay more than 50% of the budget. But I think what they miss is that the county has essentially been giving us the same amount of money per student since, my son is in 7th grade, since he was in kindergarten. And I can guarantee you it costs more to raise him now than it did when he was in kindergarten. And I'm sure you all agree with me that it costs more to educate him now than it did when he was in kindergarten, now that he's in 7th grade. 7 years has gone by and the county still was giving us the same exact amount of money per kid. And while the total dollars went up, it costs more. And I think people don't realize that. They're like, oh, it's more money every year. Yeah, but we got a lot more kids. And everything costs more. I did a quick back of the envelope calculation, and while it's a lot of dollars, it's about $63.75 a kid that we got as an increase. It's not a heck of a lot of money per kid if you divide it over the 7 years. While again, I'm excessively grateful because we can do so much with this money, at the same time, I would have been even more grateful if we could have done a little bit each year instead of just getting to a point where we're about to explode and it's still not enough. We still need to do more. I have another question about GCEI. How much would we have gotten had we been fully funded on GCEI? How much did we lose by not getting the full amount of GCEI? Which, for those who don't know, is the Geographic Cost of Education Index, which is part of the state Thornton formula for education, which certain counties get because it just costs more to educate kids in certain counties in Maryland.
Right. So in terms of total funding from the state, we would have, whereas currently we stand at about $8.7 million year-over-year increase from state funding, unrestricted state funding. We would have, had GCI been fully implemented, we would have been just north of $13 million. So there's a little bit of about just a little bit over a $4 million delta between the two of them.
And about how many teachers could we have hired with $4 million?
About 42.
Okay, so 42 teachers. So maybe some more special ed teachers, maybe some more classroom teachers for enrollment. It would have made a big impact.
Well, right. And as I said earlier, certainly when the legislature adopted their budget, the funding for the full funding for GCI is available in terms of an appropriation. So we will need to see what the executive branch of state government does and whether they elect to release the remaining balance. They certainly can at any time between now and the end of the 16 fiscal year. So it's a wait game right now.
Right. I just want to point out that I'm disappointed and extremely concerned that our 80,000 children, among other children in the state, are essentially victims when the funds that our legislators fought very hard to get into the budget, they really fought valiantly, and they're just sitting there because they cannot be spent on anything else. They're not being spent on anything else. They're just sitting there, and nothing is happening with them right now. And we have kids who could benefit from them, and instead the money is just sitting there, and nothing's happening with it. So thank you for the opportunity to say that.
Mrs. Ritchie.
First, I wanted to just say that, Ms. Burge brought up a good point about, how it costs more. And every year I have the opportunity to go to graduations, and sometimes I get to speak. And I try to look back at what was happening in kindergarten when those seniors were in kindergarten. And one of the things I do is look at the cost of things. And the cost of gas 12 years ago for this senior class was like $1.74. The cost of gas is now like $2.64. So, the point that she brings out is very good. There's sometimes it's really hard to capture in this. Having said that, this budget and the budgets that we've been starting to do really help to dig down into what is really going on in terms of how the money is being spent. When I first started this so many years ago, before I was on the board, and we used to get these big budget things, it wasn't quite as the budget book had all that stuff in it, but you had to dig a lot for it. So this, for us now, is much easier to understand and to really start to see where the money goes. I want to express publicly a very public thank you to the County Council and the County Executive for all the hard work that they've done. Of the 218 amendments, I'm hoping that not all of them were ours. I'm hoping that that some of them, did lend themselves to the police department and fire department. And I say that in jest because this is, when you talk about half the budget, that's a lot of money. But we also we are the second largest employer in the state in the county. So, we have a large group of people that we have to take care of and make sure that we have adequate staffing for and so forth. So, I'm very thankful for that. And I debated because, we did get 5.1 above maintenance of effort. And so it kind of is, I don't want to slap the hand that feeds you, but I am slightly concerned about the 1.4 million that we received out of fixed charges. And we'll hope that that will not continue to be a case because we are contractually obligated to ensure that money is available should any of our employees become ill and we have to pay bills. I believe we spent like $150 million, somewhere around that, in claims. And those are just, that could be just going to the doctor and getting your blood pressure checked and, having lab work done or having a baby, and so forth. And as those fees go up and being in healthcare, understanding how expensive healthcare is, if an employee who has contributed their money to that, and then we by contract have contributed because part of our negotiated agreement is that we're going to pay this much for each employee, when we've contributed that amount as money, then I as the employee expect that if I should go to the doctors and have to have brain surgery, that I'll be covered and that we will be able to pay our bills. So I'm very appreciative of the fact that they did that. I believe it was mentioned last year by the county's own auditor that this money should never be used for reoccurring funds. And it should because last year they took $16 million out of that. And so I would caution as we move forward that this is not a savings account. It's not an account where we saved money and now we get to spend it on a fun vacation to Disneyland. This is amount of money that is placed there to ensure that our employees who have contributed also are protected and their bills are paid. And so I just want us to remember that as we move forward. This is not a savings account. We do have a fund balance where we have made savings, and that money then gets rolled back into the budget. So, some of it is we're funding ourselves again with some of the monies that we've been able to do through cost savings, whether it's through rolling hiring freezes and so forth like that. So I'm also concerned that we didn't put any money for the bilingual facilitators, but I fully understand why. We did add 3 last year, which was much needed, and hopefully as we move forward, we'll be able to get some more in there for that. But the money was then moved to an area that impacts children directly, especially coming into our system and being able to be appropriately placed. And as we grow and gain more people in our county, that's extremely important. So we can't do it all as much as we would like to, so we have to make hard decisions, and that is a tough decision, and I support that decision. I have to mention that I am disappointed about Chesapeake, but I'm gonna let it go because we only have again so much, and being able to do 3 is better than not being able to do any. So whether I sit here next year or not, I will watch and make sure that Chesapeake is #1 on that list next year, because that's the district I live in. So I have to do that. And I'm beyond thrilled, though, with the expansion of AAA. I truly believe that in order for us to close the achievement opportunity gap, that we must address the early childhood piece of it. And this allows children to not only have some enhanced classes within their building at that early age, but it allows these teachers to be able to have this collaborative planning time to be able to fully now, we talk about in special ed schools, and not schools, but in special in schools of like the Phoenix Academy and Albert Adams, and we talk about it in special ed, having wraparound services. And for me, this is almost like a wraparound service, because all the teachers in that building are able to come together at like, not all of them, they're not all sitting down, but like 4th grade teachers can sit down with the special ed teacher, with the math resource teacher, with the STEM teacher that's in the school system. The whole people can come around, and now everybody focuses on this group of children, and they can get really down into specifically each individual child and really work to ensure that they have whatever they need to be able to be successful, and that we're addressing those needs. And I have to believe in my heart of hearts that will cause us to have a dramatic shift in the achievement gap. And it won't be something you're going to see tomorrow, because it takes 12 years for us to grow this child. And so, but I think you will start to see that in the years to come, when you start looking at the assessments and you start seeing the closing of that gap, because that's where you're gonna have a major problem. And I didn't think I was going to do that, so I'm sorry, but that's all I have.
Mrs. Hummer.
Thank you. I want to say thank you again to the County Council and the County Executive for all the hard work and collaboration that went on between everyone to get this. As a new board member, to have this be the first budget, I'm feeling spoiled, and I'm going to have really high expectations for next year to go along with it. So I hope they follow through in future times. I have just a couple of questions for clarification. So the pre-K half-day expansion, they originally wanted 12 positions. That would be how many additional pre-K classrooms?
The additional 12 positions, we convert that to how many students. That would have supported 240 students.
Okay.
The board then amended that request and added two additional positions that would have allowed us to open up 200. So those 14 seats together would have allowed us to open up 14 positions, would allow us to have 260 seats available to youngsters.
And so that will now be reduced to
by a third.
By a third. And have those schools already been selected where the pre-K?
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Lotto's also already worked with Office of School Performance and our Anthony Alston in his office and our Facilities and Transportation divisions to identify those 4 schools that would best benefit from this expansion.
So thank you. We'll be adding the pre-K seats at Odenton, Overlook, Riviera Beach, and Severin elementary schools. Okay. So those are half-day pre-K programs. So it's approximately about 140 seats added to our expansion.
Okay, thank you.
In those 4 schools, yes, ma'am.
All right. The PVA expansion, they had asked for 6 seats, and their recommendation is 2 for what will not be covered then? Will that leave gaps in our PVA programs?
So let me define, the answer is yes, but let me define what gaps are. I mean, obviously, this does not mean that we're going to have classrooms uncovered or curricula that's not being developed, et cetera. So we will have to use some of the faculty that's the conventional sort of faculty inside of the building to augment some of the courses and instructional delivery that the magnets that the instructors that are really supposed to have the magnet programs be their essentially core and only mission. We're going to have to be a little creative to augment that instruction. But what we are not saying is that we're going to be reducing the number of seats in the PVA programs. What we are not saying is that we will not be delivering the academic offerings that are required. It just means that those principals and Dr. McMahon's office, et cetera, is going to have to be quite resourceful to make sure that that all seamlessly happens.
Okay. And my final question, the special ed staffing, that is going to be one position, is this a school-based special ed position or a office?
No, ma'am, it's absolutely school-based. So we have, we experience an enrollment growth of approximately 1,100 students this year. We know here in the school district that some pro rata share, and I believe it's on the order of about maybe 9% of our student population, does receive special education services of one sort or another. So much like the 33 teachers for enrollment corresponded to the 1,100, the 5 special educators also corresponded to that 1,100. But these are all classroom direct instruction and direct support delivery individuals.
All right. Thank you.
Dr. Frank.
Mr. Shaknovich, again, thank you very much for being here and your willingness and ability to follow this budget. As a new school board member, I've got a couple of really general questions for you. I guess the first one is, apparently we've been funded beyond the maintenance of effort. Do you have any concerns about the budget that we have been funded for?
As it relates to this upcoming school year?
Yes.
Or, well, my answer to that is that this Board of Education does not take its decisions lightly, nor does the superintendent. This board put forward a budget upon a recommendation of the superintendent, and the augmented elements of this Board of Ed added to that very purposely and very deliberately. This board, in my personal estimation, put forward an extremely reasonable budget. It was very well honed and crafted to support very key strategic areas. This was not a shotgun budget of let's fix all the ills of the school district and make everybody happy in one fell swoop. This was very deliberate, very strategic. And I think the recommendations that the superintendent is forwarding you today are very deliberate and very strategic. So is it everything that this Board of Education had wanted or asked for? No. Is it everything that this organization believes it needs? The answer to that is also no. But it is decidedly better than the situation that we've found ourselves in over the last 7 years, as Ms. Burge alluded to. And we find ourselves here today because of the hard work and the dedication of our elected leaders, both in the county executive's office, at state government, and on this county council.
Thank you very much. To be a little more specific, I believe you and perhaps Dr. Olato have some concerns about the funds that were made available for staffing. Is that correct?
Well, again, as the exhibit that's before you depicts, we had requested 133.8 positions. 70 and a half of those ultimately have been, for lack of a better word, funded and authorized. So there is a gap between there. But again, not at the risk of speaking for the superintendent, and I won't endeavor to do that, I think that he has put together a very thoughtful distribution of those positions. We only have the cards that we've been dealt. No matter how much I wish I had a better hand, this is the hand that I have. It's decidedly better than the hand that I've had for the last 7 years. So I am not going to snatch defeat from victory. I think this is a very good budget. I think the elected officials took some courageous steps to move this school district and this county forward from where we have been for a number of years. And I think while not giving us everything that we had asked for, I think that those elected officials, because of those courageous decisions they made, should receive some thanks, not only from us, but from the parents and the children that we support each and every day.
There are two other items that I'd like you to comment on as briefly and succinctly as you can. You know, and I think other folks in the county know that I live in Crofton, and there's been a long time push for a Crofton High School, and I want everyone to know that is not high on my agenda. That's not why I'm here. I'd like you to talk about where in the budget is plans, or are there any plans for a Crofton High School, and also the subject of school start times and the budgetary impact of those two items.
So I'll certainly be willing to address that question now. So in no way, shape, or form am I trying to duck or evade that question. I would prefer if we took that up under the capital budget discussion, which will be the next budget agenda item that this board has to deal with. It's been my experience that for all of us involved, if we can take up consideration of the operating budget, take the presentation, have our discussions, deliberations, take public input, and put the operating budget aside, and then transition as a separate item to the capital budget, it makes that discussion, I think, better for all of us in this room today, and I think possibly better for those watching us out there in the audience.
I understand, and I particularly appreciate your clarification.
Thank you.
I just had one question. How many positions would we have needed for Monarch had the county council not funded that as a separate line item, approximately?
I don't have that. What I can do is tell you this. You know, Monarch is expanding its student body count, and through that expansion, I mean, Monarch will be servicing, I believe, on the order of about 119 additional students, no, 196 additional students. And the reason I can't answer that is the following. We, as a contract school, as a charter school, we don't dictate staffing to them. Okay, so they are required to create their own teacher-student ratios, their own staffing counts, etc. We provide them funding for the number of students. So at the contract school in Laurel, they will have 196 more youngsters there this upcoming school year than they had at September 30th of the prior year. Those staffing decisions are up to the principal of that school and the board that governs the contract school. We will provide them the funding, but the hiring is of their decision making.
Right. So, I mean, just a rough estimate, maybe 9 or 10 positions if we were going to keep ratios in the 20s to 1 range. So that item, 33 positions, we're going to have 7.5 would have certainly been 0, and we probably would have needed to take a couple other positions away from this list.
Yeah, decidedly so. And I think thank you for maybe bolstering the comments I said today. Had it not been, so I'll repeat them because they're very important. Had it not been for some very decisive and supportive actions on the part of the county council, we would be having a decidedly different conversation today if almost $3.8 million would have needed to be rechanneled to support to contract and charter schools, we would be talking single digits position distribution, not 70.5 like we are today.
Thank you. Before I take public comment, I do also want to publicly thank our county executive and our county council for listening to us over the course of the last several years, and for trusting us to be good stewards of this money. I know we've all said it. We are beyond pleased. I have 5 cards now. For public comment on the operating budget, if Jane Andrew, Marie Kovac, Sophie Harrison, Dr. Tara Snyder, and Janet Norman could come forward. You can either sit and use the mic, or you could stand at the podium, whichever you prefer.
You can't see me shake if
Don't shake.
Can I clarify something before I start? You asked about Crofton High School and the start times issue. And the staff said that they would be taken up during the capital budget?
I'll let you, yes, I did ask questions about that, and I'll let you ask the questions that you'd like to ask.
Well, that is the question. Does start times go under capital budget?
No, it does not.
So
You're in the right order.
Wasn't answered. Okay, thank you. Good morning, which it still is. I'm happy to see. I'm Jane Andrew, and I'm here primarily to thank you for including the Start School Later money in your budget request, and to congratulate you in having had the county executive and the county council go to extraordinary lengths to grant your request. I've served on this board, and I've been through many a budget cycle. I think what you have accomplished is unprecedented. It seems like the county council almost turned itself into a pretzel to give you what you wanted. We need a plaque honoring you and your fellow departing board members. I believe school start times were first discussed at this level in about 2000. In about 2006, as I remember, board member Eugene Robinson responded to a presentation with something like, "Oh, don't tell us any more of the science. We know all that. We accept it. We don't dispute it. But we don't have the money. Find us the money and we'll do it." Well, we and you have found the money. And I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but your work is not yet finished. First, please make sure that the money to start school later stays in the transportation category and that the funds are used as intended for this purpose only. And next, please make clear to Dr. Arlotto, so he in turn can make clear to the staff, how high a priority starting schools later is to you and apparently to the county. I don't mean to step on toes, but it hasn't been all that clear that the staff is prepared to hit the ground running as soon as this budget is struck by you. And there is a lot to be done in a fairly tight timeline. Software must be set up and running, bus contracts ready to be let by the time next year's budget deliberations begin. As I remember, that's around early January. I suggest that you request a timeline for your next board meeting, and that regular updates be on the agenda from there on out. We are one of the 50th largest school systems in the nation, so we move more slowly than the smaller districts. After all, it takes a lot longer to turn a battleship than it does a dinghy. I think it's going to be up to you and the new board members to take the helm and steer this ship to a healthier harbor. Thank you. Did everyone receive one of these? Okay, thank you.
Marie?
Good morning, Dr. Arlotto, President Korbelak, and distinguished members of the board. My name is Marie Kovac. I'm here to implore the superintendent and the Board of Education to keep and use the county funds as they were intended to start school later. We need Superintendent Arlotto to act quickly to purchase the software. With the help of the right consultant, Current bus routes and load counts can be analyzed for potential efficiencies. Given the money needed for more buses, shift to later school start times is now possible, and additional healthy changes could be made to account for winter months when body clocks and winter weather make the early pre-dawn morning bus schedules even more dangerous. You've heard the science. Thanks to the work of the task force, you're aware of the harm. And now, thanks to the County Council, you have the money. The time to act is now. Thank you all for all you do for our children and our students.
Good morning, School Board. My name is Sophie Harrison. I'm here today to voice my opinion to keep the county funds to start school later. An half an hour later start time prior to the 2015-2016 school year should be implemented, with another look at a permanent LT change in January 2016. This is the correct things to do, and science obviously support it. Please make it happen now. Let's be human with our kids, not insane. Thank you.
Dr. Stein.
Good morning, Dr. Arlato, President Korbelak, and members of the board. I'm Dr. Tara Snyder. I'm a Severna Park resident and the mother of 3 AACPS graduates, 2 of whom sat up there once as the student member of the board. I am also the executive director and co-founder of the national nonprofit Start School Later, which is based in Annapolis. I'm here to urge you, as the other speakers, to keep the funding in the budget to find an efficient way to run schools at safe, healthy times for all children. It's time to put this issue to bed. Whether you've been here for years or are brand new to the board, I'm sure you know that the later bell time debate has been raging for decades. Today, you have a golden opportunity to change this. When I moved to this county in 2000, as some of you have heard me say before, Superintendent Dr. Carol Sheffy Parham was already working to start school later. Back then, the evidence was already clear that starting high school at 7:17 a.m. was unhealthy and counterproductive. That's why the board approved a pilot program to start Annapolis High School at 9 a.m. beginning in 2001. At the last minute, the plug got pulled on that pilot, but the evidence only got stronger and calls for change continued. When I joined my local CAC in 2002, I was told that later start times were our #1 issue. When my daughters were in high school in the mid-2000s, there was an all-out campaign on the part of the countywide CAC to fix this situation, as Dr. Frank well knows. And last fall, the American Academy of Pediatrics joined many other health and education experts by recommending that middle and high schools start no earlier than 8:30 a.m. But still, nothing changed. We were told that even if kids were being hurt, change was too complicated and too expensive. Well, now my kids are grown, but I still remember the nightmare of getting them to school by 7:17. And it was a nightmare for our entire family. It made school miserable. It made life miserable. And it made all 3 of my kids sick, literally. And these were top students, highly motivated. I shudder to think what these hours do to kids who aren't motivated to go to school, to study, or to participate despite incredible fatigue, or who don't have families to make sure they do. We can change this now. We can change it for every child in this school system. You have an unprecedented opportunity today to play a critical role in that change, and I thank you in advance for taking that opportunity and making things right at last.
Janet.
Thank you, Madam President, to Dr. Arlato, previous members of the board, and new members. For those who don't know me, I'm an Annapolis High PTSA parent, Annapolis Middle PTSA parent, appointed member of the Annapolis Education Commission, founder of the Hillsborough Robotics Club, but I'm speaking for myself, not any of those organizations. Perhaps I'm speaking for the 7-0 resolution of the County Council, who represents nearly 556,000 residents of Anne Arundel County. I've given a testimony sheet to the board secretary to give to you, which outlines some of the things that were said in the county council hearing last Friday on the 12th. I want you to read that closely, and I've provided links because you need to see that video testimony, and you need to see how the board was represented in that. You have the fortune of having Mr. Pruski on that board, on that county council, who understands your challenges, but you need to understand the challenges that the county council is on. They're still fuming about the $4.5 million you lost in the software debacle. They know which roofs are leaking and not maintained. So I would urge you not to do any moaning and groaning about the healthcare fund balance charges, because you had $29 million in that fund at the end of the year. If you keep complaining about it, no one is going to, you will damage your credibility, and no one is going to believe you that you need money. Mr. Pruski said in the council meeting, if we give them this $602,000 and they don't do start times, that's on them. The council has funded it. So I agree with the speaker who says you need to get on a timeline pronto and roll this out. Vet it, make it right. This can't be a botched rollout. It has to be perfect and ready to go for the December superintendent's budget. My son's words, in 8th grade, I was really diligent about my homework, but now I'm too tired to care. That haunts me every day. Anne Arundel County's 10% higher than state average teen substance abuse haunts me every day. This is off the record, don't quote me on this, but if you read the text between teenagers, and my son would be mortified to know I do, you will see the urgency. A staggering amount of them are all exhausted and depressed. The PVA students who have to come from even farther for the magnet programs, excessively harmed by this. You're harming people every day without acting. Mr. Mosier said that the huge burden is if we change start times 3 times within a school student's career. Actually, the huge burden is the daily interaction with the depressed, exhausted teams. Your start times led you to bad decision makings with this winter. So please get it right and do it pronto.
Thank you. I just want to let you know that as soon as I touched down from a week vacation, I turned on County Council's link and watched that entire video, thanks to your county auditor who sent me the link.
And I hope all of you.
And we do have a timeline, and we went through that earlier. You might have missed it when you came in.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I have one more card, Deborah Wood.
I'm Dr. Deborah Wood, a child development specialist, and with my husband, exhausted guardians of a Broadneck High School student with special needs. We started his high school experience waking up at 5:30 a.m. so he could catch the bus to a building that is less than 10 minutes from our home. We've since opted to drive him and get 45 more minutes of precious sleep, but it's still too early. Here's the history. Sleep science research findings in the late 1990s put forth the suggestion that we had school schedules backward. Up until about age 11, children get sleepy around 8 p.m. and waken refreshed 10 hours later. With the onset of adolescent hormones, children get sleepy more like 11 p.m. with an 8 a.m. internal alarm. Across the country, people were waking up to the idea that we needed to fix the schedule. Locally, strides and setbacks have come with steadfast advocates and changes in leadership. Here's the literature. Other school districts across the country have managed to restructure bus routes, sports, and other after-school activities, childcare, and family life around healthier, smarter start times. Better attendance, as well as academic and other benefits, have resulted from making the necessary adjustments to actualize more appropriate school schedules. Here's the science. During sleep, the body fights germs, builds and repairs cells, and clears away toxin built up from a day of thinking. If your thinking is fuzzy in the morning, you didn't have your toxins cleared. During dreams, the brain reviews and sorts the prior day's experiences, thoughts, and emotions. New information gets stored away for later retrieval. Yesterday's biology lesson, processed over a good night's sleep, readies the brain to receive tomorrow's biology lesson. Staying asleep until the brain has finished that last stream, around 8 a.m. for teenagers, optimizes high school learning. Here's the sociology. Some students have the economic advantage to drive themselves to school later than they'd have to leave home for a bus stop, or they have a parent available to drive them to school. Others, less financially fortunate, are limited to those early bus times unless they further stretch their family's already thin budget to catch an Annapolis transit bus or private cab. If they miss the school bus and don't have the fare money, they miss a whole day of school. Here's the math. The County Council approved $738,500 to support later start times. The software package and the person to run it will likely result in reduced ride times, optimal bus capacity, and overall a more efficient use of drivers and buses. Such software in other school districts has proven to more than pay for itself. Here's the ethics. Anne Arundel County Public Schools needs to use the county's funds as they were intended for software and a person to run it. A 30-minute shift for all by this August is possible with such implementation. It's the right thing to do. In August, if not January, it's past time to start school later.
Mrs. Nally.
I move that as part of this operating budget approval, the board direct the superintendent to reserve the $602,240 already allocated in this budget for the express purpose of using it toward shifting start times in the 2016-17 school year. I further move that the board direct the superintendent to provide a report at the February 3rd, 2016 meeting regarding efficiencies determined by utilization of the bus routing software so that this board can determine the exact nature of the start time shift to be implemented in the 2016-17 school year.
Is there any discussion on Mrs. Nally's motion? Mr. Webb.
Just want, excuse me, the February 16th date. Will that give us enough time to hear all the findings and make a decision at that point to implement it in a timely manner?
Yes, you will finalize my recommendations to the budget at the final board meeting in February. So that will give you time. If you hear the date in the early meeting, then you'll have 2 weeks to then make decisions to alter the budget if you need to change funds around in order to support changing start times for the 16-17 school year, which is what I think the intention of your motion is.
Exactly. I had understood from speaking with Mr. Chaknovich, I believe, at one point that we would need to place orders for buses. Where's Alex? We would need to place orders for buses by February to, is that not mid-February? Is that not accurate? I think, yeah.
For the record, Alex Chekno, Chief Operating Officer. Essentially, that is correct. We would go out to bid and work with our contract providers to bid and establish those routes. The way that buses work is a little bit differently than automobiles, whereas I can go down to my local Chevy or Ford dealership and pick up a ready-made car. That's traditionally not the model that the bus construction industry uses. So they are built to suit in terms of exacting to our specifications, to state of Maryland requirements, et cetera. So we would put a bid out. We would work with our contractors to award those bids. They would then put the orders in with the bus manufacturers to begin the assembly process for the chassis, the motors, the transmissions. Those are the three big lead item terms of timeline-wise, so that we could take delivery of those, have them inspected by the state, licensed and tagged. That's one piece of it. And then also the contractors would have time to work with acquiring staff, making sure they get through the CDL licensing process, get authorized by the state of Maryland to drive the buses as well, because we need a certificated, properly federally and state endorsed driver. So that time is required for both the bus manufacturing element of it, as well as the preparation and acquisition of these certificated drivers.
Which is why it being now June of 2015, 2015, we've missed that February 2015 deadline for August bus orders of this year. Yeah.
Right.
We should have placed orders in February had we had the money on the books for August of 2015 if we needed new buses.
Right, and the funding that has been provided by the county council would certainly facilitate our ability to go out to the market space, and the bus contractors, knowing that the funding is available, because we're not going to be buying the buses. The contractors are going to have to get lines of credit. They'll have to work with their financial institutions and those manufacturers. But knowing that the money, prospectively, depending upon how this Board of Education handles the motion that Ms. Nally just made, that contracting community, the bus construction community, et cetera, would all know that the funding is there, essentially ready to back up their orders, which will make their ability to get financing much easier. It will ease the concerns of the bus manufacturing community. They will be able to place those orders. We are in a little bit of a credit tight environment right now, as you probably know. So this funding from the county government and this motion from the board would certainly solidify any angst that a lending institution, a bus manufacturer, or a bus contractor would have with respect to placing orders and bringing on staffing and spending money on training and licensing those individuals.
Thank you. I wanted to clarify that for you because you were asking us to make a change in August of 2015, and we've already passed that February bus order deadline. That's why we have to have the money on the books in this fiscal year to place the order next February. And I also didn't mean to keep you all up here. If you don't want to stay seated, you can go back. We could call you back up after your choice. Mrs. Nally.
And I want to clarify, and I want to thank each of you. And I want to clarify for the new board members and for I am in favor of starting school later. But you all know I am a former elementary school principal. And I would never vote for anything that would hurt or harm our elementary students I understand and I hear from you and I hear from my friends, but I also hear from my fellow principals. What is the latest start time for elementary school? 9:15. My grandchildren start at 9:15. I think that's late for elementary school personally. If we automatically, as we said in one of our options with the current funding, moved 30 minutes up summarily, that would mean those children would not start school, would not arrive until 9:45. If you've ever done an elementary school schedule, you know that they have to have art, music, and PE, and they've got to eat lunch, and somebody's got to have it first thing in the morning. So you bring a fifth grader, for example, or one grade, 10 to 11, they'd have art or music or PE 3 days. Then they would have to eat lunch. Many of these children would not start their academic day until afternoon. I cannot support that. So I think I'm so thankful to the county council who have given us this opportunity to start schools later, but not on the back of some 30 elementary schools. We just can't do that. And I would love to jump here right now and say, we'll do it. We'll do it in August. I can't do that in good conscience because I have talked until I was blue in the face. We've tried to figure a way out to do it, and we can't do it without harming elementary kids. That would be a terrible schedule. So I'm just thankful that for the county council, that we have this money and that we will be starting school later, but maybe not in the timeline you'd like. Thanks.
Maybe the software can help with that problem.
Yes,
well, that's what I'm hoping to.
Yep.
That's what we're hoping to.
That's exactly why we wanted the software, was to see if we can tighten those elementary schools so they don't have to start at 10 o'clock.
I appreciate the board support, and I've spent 20 years in software, and I've talked to some of the software companies that do this kind of work. They have the consultants. They analyze the as-is routes. They look at your geography, and they help you figure out where you are, where you can go, and how to get there.
And that's why we're thrilled with
Thank
this
you.
budget. Mrs. That's right. Mrs. Ritchie.
When we did the school start time survey, there were 3 options that came forward, and none of them were clear. I mean, there was not a clear one on there. You know, Dr. Snyder, I've been around quite as long as you, and I remember sitting there when they voted on the thing thinking, thank God that's not me. And, you know, see what karma does. But the thing is that there was no clear consensus. So part of what we're going to have to do in this is find a clear consensus. And we may not, but we've got to really, because, you know, they had the options, and then there's people who took A and B and C and D and none of the above, and, you know, and so we're going to have to get those people, and they're going to have to make a choice. And then we're also going to have to delve out further, because I can't remember correctly, but I believe there was only like about 2,000 people who took that survey, which is a large amount of people. But we have 80,000 students in our schools. So we have to, from our perspective, we're going to have to do a big push to ensure that people come back, and whether they take it or not, to be able to understand. So there's a lot of work that still has to be done. I understand where you think maybe we can do it in August, when we've already talked about the bus things, which may or may not be an issue. I also understand about starting mid-year, but the problem is we really have, we don't want to be switching times 2 and 3 times, because that just becomes, what happens is then people get irritated. I actually had somebody who this weekend said to me, you know, I don't want you switching around, and I'm going to have to go to my employer and keep asking to change my time of work. So, you know, that's an issue. And the role that I have to play here is being in healthcare. I fully understand the issues with sleep deprivation. I fully understand the consequences for that population of student, but that's not the only population of student we have. So when Ms. Nally talks about the student in not going and getting any academics until afternoon, well, that speaks to the fact that now we're talking about the achievement gap, which is a huge problem in our county. And, well, I don't want to say huge. It's an issue of our county. Well, are we going to sacrifice that for this? So there's a lot of questions that have to be asked. Asking them doesn't mean that I don't appreciate that high school students have to get up early. I remember getting up early, walking with a flashlight and going to the thing. So I understand that. But I also understand that as a big picture person, I have to look at the entire perspective. I also have to take into account people. That doesn't mean they're not willing to change. We have to be willing to figure out how to make that change. With the business community, with the sports and athletics, with the, you know, with all of these other things, that doesn't mean it can't happen. It just means that we have to be able to accept and listen, just like as we've done here, to all of what their concerns are, and then we have to try to make decisions based on that. And I personally do not want to rush that, because I don't want to have to come back and have to do it again. So that's
Ms. Ritchie, since you brought me up, I'd just like to respond. I totally agree that it is very complicated, and that in solving this, we have to look at the big picture.
I have to take our
we
board.
have to look at the harm we're doing right now, too.
We
as
need to
part of
finish
that.
up our board comments before we can go back to public participation. I'm sorry. Mrs. Burge.
And it's not really supposed to be a back and forth anyway. I think public comment is actually over. Well, we have a new amendment. Oh, okay. I actually, I wanted to piggyback on what Mrs. Nally had said, because my children's elementary school used to be one of those 9 or 9:15 schools, and my children didn't get home until 4 o'clock. And if they didn't get home until 4:30, they were 7 o'clock bedtime kids. I can't imagine how we would have lived life. I mean, it was bad enough when they only had 3 hours in the evening of life. If they only had 2.5 hours between getting home from school, trying to get in homework and dinner was hard enough. I can't imagine, we also tried to do soccer practice and other things, and they only had 2.5 hours before it was bedtime. So just the straight 30-minute thing, I've said for several years, I would never be supportive of, because it just doesn't work. As we're doing our research and looking at possibilities, The one thing that has and will continue to concern me as we add additional buses is making sure that our bus drivers who no longer have 3 and 4 route jobs make enough money to be willing to be bus drivers. It's not, and I've had folks from the public say we shouldn't let our transportation system run our education system. But from this perspective, you have to look at whether or not it works. And if you can't hire people to do a job, then it doesn't work. So if you don't have enough bus drivers to get your kids where they need to go, then you can't get them to school. So it doesn't work. So that's something that we need to be particularly careful of as we change bus routes and as we look at how we're changing them, to make sure that we will still have enough people willing to not work full time anymore. Most of these bus drivers already don't make a whole lot of money, and let me tell you, they don't have a really great job. I hear the stories. I have a kid who rides a bus. It's just something that concerns me, and I want to make sure that as we're doing the studies, we're talking to the actual contracted bus drivers about what they will do. Will they continue to work? Or will they have to get some other job to make ends meet that's going to make this not possible for them? Because that's something we have to take into consideration. How are we getting our kids to school? Because if you're now doing 4 routes and the future, because if we do this so that everyone's in a more compact time, because we know we don't want it to be from 7, if we just move everyone, it's not going to be a good time. So we want everybody to be in a more compact time, like 8 to 9. Your bus drivers may only be able to do 2 routes. So that means you're going to need a lot more buses. So that means each bus driver can only do maybe 2 routes instead of 4, or 1 instead of 3, or 2 instead of 3. So how many more bus drivers do you need, and how many fewer routes they do? It's just something we really need to pay attention to, and whether or not there are available people to do those jobs.
Mr. Webb.
I think we're being a bit presumptuous here. We should wait and see what the software tells us. Let us analyze this, see what the software tells us. My only concern is if it does tell us that we need more buses, or there are other things that are needed, are we going to have enough time to make a cogent decision if we're looking at our second meeting in February? Do we need to have some results back to us in January in order for the board to be able to deliberate and make a sound decision?
May I? So I think you bring up a couple of really important points, Mr. Webb. The short answer is we don't know. I don't know exactly what the software is going to be able to deliver between when we turn it on or when we get it up and running in January or February, because we've not done this before. So we have gone through the process. I've heard from the public and our speakers here today that they're emphatic that the superintendent get this moving as soon as the money becomes available. Well, this has been moving since February. Right, so we've put the RFP out there. We've got contractors that are lined up. They'll be here next Tuesday for their final interviews, and the contracting office will go through that process of selecting one of those bids. So for July 1, when the money's available, we'll have somebody ready to go, a contractor to get the software up and running. We have to then advertise, hire an analyst. But to answer your question, so by January, February of next year, will we know everything we can know from the software? The answer is I don't think so. Because keeping in mind, we're going to be running this software parallel to what we're doing now. You don't want to run this software by itself now because students won't get to school. So we're going to continue doing what we're doing and run the software parallel next year. It won't be standing on its own next year. Does that make sense? So by February of next year, the software won't be operating on its own. So we won't have its full capabilities known. That's just the nature of getting this up and running and software. And so we'll know something. I don't know exactly what's going to know. We're glad to come back to the board in February to give you what we know and what we think we can then build into the budget. I say all that to say, in changing start times, it might not be everything that the board wants for the 16-17 school year. Maybe we learn some things and we change some things in one year and then the next, because we're going to have to buy routes. We're going to have to make sure the contractors get the buses. We're going to have to make sure they can hire with now these condensed routes. One bus driver might not want to work for just a small part of the day, like to do a number of runs. So the answer is we don't know exactly what's going to give us, but it's not going to give us everything we would want to know next February, because the software won't be operating on its own at that time. It'll still be running in parallel to what we're doing now.
Right, it'll be running in parallel, but at least at that point will we know whether or not additional buses are needed?
We hope. Again, I don't know exactly what it's going to be telling us. I'm not an expert in this area at all, or in many areas, but that's a different story. And so I don't know exactly what it's going to tell us, but we believe, as I've talked to my team, Alex and the team, that we should have a pretty good understanding. We should have some knowledge about what it's going to be able to do for us, where it might see some efficiencies, where we might be able to reduce runs, add stops, those kinds of things. And so it'll give us an idea to give some information. The board say, okay, this is what we think we can do. 30 minutes next school year, 16-17, may or may not be the best option that it delivers to us based on the information. I just don't know that.
Okay. Do you think maybe by September we can get some indication of what the system is supposed to be able to do for us, whichever system is selected for this exercise?
Yes, I think I would assume, I'm looking now, so I'm assuming that the contractors can tell us what it is that they're working, the two that I believe are coming in that have been selected to go through this now final process for the bid are doing this in jurisdictions much our size and larger. So I think they could tell us now, they could probably sit down with you right now and say, this is what we've been able to do with other jurisdictions. I believe that would be the case. Is that accurate? Yes.
Thank you.
And that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, just to reiterate Mrs. Nally's motion to amend the original motion to approve the operating budget, she has added that as part of this operating budget approval, the board direct the superintendent to reserve the $602,240 already allocated in this budget for the express purpose of using it towards shifting start times in the 2016-17 school year. I further move that the board direct the superintendent to provide a report at the February 3rd, 2016 meeting regarding efficiencies determined by utilization of the bus routing software, so that this board can determine the exact nature of the start time shift to be implemented in 2016-17. That amended motion has been properly made and seconded and discussed by the board. So now I could take public comment on her motion, if there is any.
I just wanted to clarify that if the software shows you where you could pick somebody up 10 minutes earlier or later, would you wait another whole school year to do that, or you will be implementing that immediately within a week or after February?
No, we are not planning. Once we set the routes for the 15-16 school year, we're not planning on changing them.
And maybe
not for the 15-16 school year. I don't think that's fair to parents, daycare providers, before school providers. We're going to set the schedule for next school year, and we're going to stay with that schedule for the benefit of the school system, and then we'll move forward from there.
My experience, and maybe this is just for a special needs child, we would get a phone call from the driver saying, as of Monday, I'll be 10 minutes later, earlier. And I know other people who also have special needs kids, that the bus stop pickup time changes or drop-off time changes as their students change.
And those are on much, and again, for the special needs students, on a sort of a different system. And we do most of that ourselves. We own about 55 buses that does the work for our special needs students versus the 19 contractors that do the other 56,000 students that are traveling on our buses. So it's a little different in that case, but system-wide, would we announce a 10-minute or 30-minute change at some point during the school year? And the answer to that question is still no.
May I make a comment? I think I'd just like to echo, my name's Mike Harris, and I'm actually Sophie's husband. I'm sitting in the back watching. It's the first time I've ever been here. Interesting. I've been on union boards and all, and it reminds me a lot of that, resolutions and seconds and all that. I'd like to just try to echo, I think, what Mr. Webb was saying, and that is that if we don't know by February, then we can't make a decision in February, and therefore we push it yet another year. And I'm afraid, though, if you're not careful, that every February we'll be pushing it the next year because there's more information. I mean, so I think that idea of having a finite timeline that one of the speakers mentioned is really important. Otherwise, we're going to spin wheels here, and it could be for decades, right? Is that, I guess I'm not allowed to ask a question. So I will say then that I think I might be echoing what Mr. Webb says, because I think he's thinking February, right? Well, maybe not February. Maybe it's February of 16, maybe 17, maybe 18. So if you guys are, respectfully can maybe come up with a finite timeline, because it sounds like as we talk more and more here, there's more information to be gathered. There's more, and then even more after that. This could go on. I mean, literally could go on. Well, it has, right. So just as a concerned, citizen and parent listening from behind, and being sometimes on these type of boards in my past, I've seen this type of thing happen, and I can almost see that it can happen again. And maybe the board members have been here understand it, and maybe the new board members are maybe going, yeah, I see what he means. So that's my comment. Maybe the finite timeline, and try to make it in February to at least there's a decision point, not just another information gathering. See what I mean?
We actually, in February 18th, 2015, this year, we already set that timeline. The timeline is that the start times have to change by August of 2016.
Okay.
They have to.
Has to.
And that by February, when we have to approve the budget for FY17, we have to know how much money we need to do that.
Okay, good, because it sounds like with the information gathering, it's going to be tough to do because there might be more questions.
It is going to be very tough. It's going to be tight and tough because we had to wait to get the money to order the software, to buy the analysts.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
but
I
at
see your
least we
point,
have
yeah.
it now.
Yeah, and
So-
that's what Mr. Arlotto was saying. We might not know.
Right.
So if you don't know, how do you act? And, you're back into that thing again, right?
Fortunately, what happened in February was that we directed him to go ahead and start the request for purchase process, the contracting process to buy the software, even though we didn't know if we were going to have the money to buy it. So
Yeah, I'm glad it's there. No, definitely. I love seeing that line item in the budget, for
way
sure.
off. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So
Hey, thanks.
there
I
is
appreciate
definitely
it.
a timeline.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Dr. Frank, did you have something to ask?
I'm sorry you stepped away, but I wanted to respond to your comment. I've heard several things here that talk about a timeline, and as an engineer, that's important to me. I want to know what is the timeline, and I'd like the public to know what is the timeline. At some point, we're either going to do this or we're not going to do this. What is the timeline? And I just want to emphasize that. I want to know, and I want you to know.
Great. Thank you.
I hope I've been clear today. I don't think I have because I keep getting the same question. We have a timeline. It was established in February of 2015 to purchase the software if we were given the money in July. That's on track to happen. Hire the analyst, run the analysis, and have Dr. Arlotto deliver that analysis and recommendation to us before we have to adopt an FY17 budget, which is mid-February of this next year. So that is our timeline. And then the schools would start later in August of 2016. Mr. Webb.
I think this is important enough where we should have some type of update somewhere between now and February 16th.
I would agree.
You would agree?
But we can direct Dr. Arlotto to do that.
We can
without
direct
a motion.
Dr. Arlotto to do that without
We
a
don't
motion.
need a motion for that.
Okay, something else for Dr. Arlotto. Great. Thank you, Dr. Arlotto.
Is there any other public comment?
Yes, please. I was also a member of the Tyler Heights Parent Redistricting Committee, and we had a timeline there. I don't know if some of you new board members know what a complete cluster bomb that turned into. So I've been scarred by the process of waiting for good things to happen further down the line. And I know that if DOD encounters a safety problem they do a complete shutdown, and they do a daily reporting of how they're working to fix the problem. So when you say that perhaps you're going to give 2 weeks notice to your school board members of what your proposed solution is, that's not adequate to the people who are directing you to do your job. I think that it's got to be ready.
Let me interrupt, just so that we're clear. I didn't come up with that date. This is a resolution from the board, right? I work for the board, so I didn't come up with that 2-week date.
But
and I don't know
said
about
it
cluster
would,
bombs,
it
but
would
I do
give
know
2
that
weeks.
the board has been working really hard,
Right.
and I've tried to work one-on-one with the board, and one-on-one and in conjunction with the board to try and begin to make some of this happen. Okay, so it starts, and it was very clear that we need to do this in a linear process. Let's get the software. Let's find out what we can learn from it, and then let's look to move to change start times. This board appears to be committed to changing start times, right?
Right.
And I work for the board, and so that's the direction we're going, okay?
Right. But I'm hoping that you get on a very tight timeline and that you're reporting weekly to the board on your progress so that they have it by December when you're submitting your board salary. I believe I still
It's really not the public's job to direct the superintendent's timeline. It's our job to do that.
I'm giving you public comment. I'm 1 minute and 53 seconds into my 3 minutes of public comment.
I'm just letting you know that
Okay.
it's not your job to direct the superintendent's timeline.
I'm not. I'm suggesting that the board should. That the board and perhaps the February 3rd date.
We
in my
have
opinion,
directed the
is
superintendent,
too
or we're
late.
about to vote on it anyway.
Okay, I still have
That's
45 more
fine.
seconds.
Go ahead.
That I think the Tyler Heights process is illustrative, and we can't let that happen. We can't let that happen again. We're doing harm every single day to our students. I feel the Alzheimer's plaques building in my brain and my son's brain every day from this process of sleep deprivation. So I hope that we can all see the proposals in the December to January budget proposal that comes out of the superintendent. Thank you very much.
I just have to add that I would not wish for an update in September, October, or November as a final update to tell us what to do when he doesn't have all of the data that we would want to see. So
interim.
We would trust and wish that the update we receive, which has to be no later than February 3rd, is accurate and as accurate and as complete as it can be. I don't think we're going to have an accurate and complete an assessment in December if we're already being told that it might not be accurate and complete forever on February 3rd. So, Tara.
Just have a brief comment. I hope it's pertinent to the motion on the table. I'm really pleased that the board is committed to making this change. And in that light, I just wanted to offer a friendly suggestion based on what I've seen happening in other districts around the country that have tried to make this change. If this change is really going to be done successfully, you're doing the right thing right now. Looking at the software, looking at efficiencies, giving it time. However, you're probably familiar with the blueprint for change that came out of the group that helped Fairfax County Public Schools do this. And if you're not, I highly recommend that you look at it. But one of the points that comes out of that report very clearly is that you've got to get the community on board with the change. And part of this whole process is not just finding efficient routes, but also addressing the kinds of concerns that you've raised, bringing people together, bringing the teachers together, the parents, the bus drivers, the sports people, and talking to them about what they're worried about and seeing how they can be addressed to see how many of these concerns really aren't real, how they can be addressed. And you're right, Dr. Arlato, that we might not solve it all in one fell swoop. It has to be worked on. But in other words, the community has to be educated about why this change is happening, why it's so important, why sleep matters, why kids can't get sleep, and how much hurt and harm and cost we're doing right now by not changing. When the community understands that, all the stakeholders do, then this can be done successfully. If it's not done that way, people will wonder why you're doing this to them. They're going to fight back, and it's not going to work. And I'm the biggest proponent on earth of this change, but I know it has to be done that way, so I hope you'll consider that.
And Dr. Snyder, I want to thank your group because you're a huge part of that community education. That's a partnership that we have relied on throughout the process so far.
We're happy to help at any point.
I know you are. Thank you. All right, any other public comment on the amended motion? So if I have this right, on the amendment. The amendment. Are we ready to vote on the amendment? All those in favor of Mrs. Nally's amendment? Okay, the amendment passes 800. Now we can vote on the overall motion to approve the FY 2016 operating budget. All those in favor? Motion passes 800. Thank you. Now we can move on to the capital budget. Item 4.02, FY 2016 capital budget adoption. This is also an information to action item. Do I have a motion to move this from information to action? Dr. Arlato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend that the Board of Education adopt the County Council approved FY 2016 capital budget as presented.
Do I have a motion? Okay. And now we have a presentation on the capital budget.
Thank you, and good afternoon. Again, for the record, Alex Shaknovis, Chief Operating Officer.
Lisa Seaman Crawford, Director of Facilities.
And we're here to provide you a very brief overview of item 4.02, which is an information action item before you this afternoon regarding the FY16 capital budget. As you may recall, when I appeared before this body at its first meeting of May, I had opined at that time upon my observation of this capital budget being one of the best constructed capital budgets that I've seen come out of a county executive's office, and I remain in that exact same place. County Executive Hsu and the County Council and his budget officer, Chief Administrative Officer, Mr. Hammond, have worked collaboratively with Ms. Lisa Seaman Crawford, her staff, and I over many, many months to arrive at this point. So the budget before you essentially represents a $151.7 million commitment towards the capital improvement needs of this county. And it has changed very little since it was last presented to you as a result of the county executive's recommendation. That change, however, is important. If you take a look at priority number 29 on the exhibit before you, you'll see a line item called playground equipment improvements. And so through actions of the county council when they debated and deliberated the final budget on the 12th of June, one of those 218 amendments was to amend the already very well-constructed capital budget of the county executive and add an additional $300,000 to the capital budget to, for the first time since that category existed, support the acquisition of playground improvements. The rest of the budget then remains unchanged. So you'll see those items listed in blue are items that we requested funding for. The value that was adopted by the county council is slightly less than that, but as I stated back when we met a month ago, those reductions won't truly impede the progress of the school district because we do have some funds in prior years that we can roll forward, as well as some of these projects are in the design and permitting phase and may not be fully ready to break ground, et cetera, within the current year. So we are not, so there's no cause for concern with the items banded in blue. Similarly, there are now only two, or formerly there were three items banded in red, and those are items that were not recommended for funding in the current year. One of it being the additions. So this is to support the two gymnasium addition projects. But as you recall, the state government, when they adopted their budget, did in fact acknowledge approval for the design of those projects, and we are moving forward with that. They are actively under design. But since the state government, due to fiscal constraints on their side, did not recommend construction funding towards those two gymnasiums, we worked with the county government as well to simply hold off on funding those two projects so that those dollars, scarce resources that they are, can be much better redirected to other active projects that are up and running concurrently. So that represents the $151.5 million direct to the Board of Education capital budget. There is one category at the bottom called school offsites. That is not monies that goes to the Board of Education and Ms. Seaman Crawford's staff to execute. That is money that is, however, for the benefit of the school district, in that it is furnished to the county's Department of Public Works. And the County Department of Public Works then in turn works collaboratively with our Transportation Division and the Police Department to identify intersections along throughout the county and or sidewalk elements that should be installed to enhance pedestrian safety, facilitate walking routes to school that are appropriate and efficient as well. So that was also funded. So those are the two items. That is a compilation of those items that were direct funded to us, as well as the school offsite. There were two other elements to the capital budget that were off book, and so I'll circle back to the areas that Mr. Frank gave me a prompt for, and that is the following. The county government, in their budget, the county executive, when he put forward his budget, did have money in to do a viability study for a future school to be constructed in the Crofton area, and monies to begin the analysis of the old mill complex solution. So if I can comment on both independently, the board is aware that we do in fact own property in the Crofton area. It's immediately adjacent to Crofton Middle School, and when that property was acquired and developed for the purposes of a middle school many, many years ago, 4+ decades now, at that time the designers did a very rudimentary outline of how that property someday in the future could be utilized for the construction of a high school facility. That time is approaching more now than it did back when that property was still developed. But the one thing is certain: the regulatory environment that we find ourselves in today is much different than the regulatory environment that we found ourselves in 4 decades ago. So what this viability study will allow us to do will be to take a look at that property that we own in light of today's educational needs, in light of today's environmental needs in terms of tree conservation ordinances, stormwater quality, stormwater quantity, in terms of today's traffic regulations, et cetera, for ingress and egress to the site, et cetera. So we will be able to take a look at that property prospectively on the front side to confirm that in fact that is a viable site to develop a secondary school, specifically a high school facility. Similarly, we have a very complex issue before us, and that is the redevelopment of the old mill property, the old mill complex property. As this Board of Education knows, that property in and of itself, as it sits today, actually supports not just Old Mill High School, but it supports the 2 Old Mill Middle Schools. That piece of property also has Rippling Woods Elementary School on it. That's in your 6-year capital plan, as well as the Ruth Eason facility. And so taking a look at that level of complexity alone, with 5 schools sitting on one piece of property, and now layered on top of it those very same regulatory elements that I spoke to earlier, and now add 2 new very complicated pieces of the puzzle at Old Mill. One, BG&E has interstate transmission lines that run through that property today. And probably of the greatest challenge is that property is in the BWI flight path. And so part of the regulatory environment today is that because of different noise ordinances, et cetera, and regulatory actions that have been promulgated by the FAA and MAA, which is the state of Maryland's parallel partner in aviation, there are constraints on the development or redevelopment of that property today, because again, we are in a flight path for BWI. So the $500,000 that the county executive put into his budget and the county council concurred with would allow us, much like the Crofton site, to bring on a professional team of consultants, site civil engineers, environmental engineers, acoustic engineers, et cetera, to begin assessing those properties as they relate to today's regulatory environment and today's challenges of construction, and begin reaching out to the officials at the MAA and the FAA to begin gathering that data and defining what parts of that property can be developed or redeveloped on a going forward basis. We will be taking the output of this viability study, and that would form part of the basis on a future formal feasibility study, and then ultimately efforts that would lead to the design and construction of schools. So with that, I believe we've concluded our comments, and would turn it over, Madam President, to you and your colleagues and the superintendent.
Mrs. Ritchie.
I can't tell you how beyond happy I am that item 29 is there. For many of you know how hard I fought years and years and years to have people not put in the playgrounds and try to, because that's part of, you know, what the school construction and part of what I felt that the county government owed in terms of putting in schools. And so once they weren't being repaired, and, you know, we put a nice playground in when the school's built, and then 5-10 years down the road, it starts to be, you know, falling apart and needs to be replaced. And some schools have very robust parent groups who were able to raise $40,000, $50,000 to be able to do that, and there were others who were not. And for those who were not, they just kind of sat there and didn't get to really necessarily always get to have what they did, the equipment as well. So I'm very thrilled that the money is there and will be able to be used to help to upgrade those things. And maybe now the parents can, instead of trying to raise all that money to buy playground equipment, can maybe expend some of their energy in terms of helping us to increase public awareness of public education and how important it is. So maybe they can take some of that time they spent doing fundraising and doing some advocacy for public education instead. That's just a hint. I've been using that line for years, so maybe sometimes somebody will listen now that we have $300,000.
Mrs. Burge.
I want to echo Mrs. Ritchie's comments about the playground money. I was so ecstatic when I saw that there. I'm sorry that it wasn't there for poor Odenton Elementary, who wasn't just trying to upgrade their playground. They had no playground because we took it out. So because it was no longer met the safety requirements. So they had to completely replace their playground. So I'm thrilled, especially for the schools that don't have the same parent level of support that can raise that kind of money. And I was impressed at how quickly Odenton did it, to be honest with you. They did a fantastic job. But yeah, I'm so thrilled and thankful to the county council for seeing the wisdom and really the responsibility of our government to be providing playgrounds at schools for children, and how it benefits the county through the Rec and Parks program as well for having playgrounds at our schools. It's not just the school system that benefits, it's the county as a whole. So I am very pleased at seeing that. And overall, I am very happy with this year's capital budget. I am quite pleased. I do want to ask a question about so the Old Mill study, we are getting the money and we are performing the study. Is that correct, as the school system?
No, ma'am. The funding is contained in the CAO's contingency account.
Okay.
So currently, or as the budget year begins, and then we will work collaboratively with the county government to identify the mechanism of either transfer or utilization. But much like, as you recall, the funding for the MGT study was
Okay.
in the CAO's contingency account, and we worked very well together to resolve how to get a contract in place and move that study forward. I don't anticipate any issues with doing that for either the Crofton project or the Old Mill project.
Okay, so
as
they're
well.
both being funded that same way.
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I wanted to just take a moment. I know this isn't the budget we're voting on, but it's part of our 6-year plan, which was impacted by the county executives and the county council's budget because they do a 6-year plan. I mean, we're just adopting our 1-year budget today. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. So what happens is a budget is adopted, formally adopted for one fiscal year at a time. By state requirements, we are also required to telegraph essentially a 6-year plan, and they work concurrently because in capital budgeting, they're multi-year projects, and you're selling bonds across, you know, a span of time, et cetera. So while they both inform each other, the official action is the adoption of the current year budget.
And so on the last page, it has what our 6-year request was, our 6-year plan, and then what the county's action was so far as the 6-year plan. What concerns me is that we have money in a CAO contingency fund for plans to study 2 particular projects that are apparently important to some people, which are also important to me. But everything has been zeroed out for all of our other future projects, which I understand is because we haven't gotten the results of our MGT study. And I see a lack of consistency there. Because if we're waiting for the results of our MGT study to decide what we're going to be doing in the future, then I don't understand why some projects are sort of jumping the gun and getting funding this year when they may not even be on our list, which this Board of Education has always prided itself on having a very apolitical list. And they're not being funded at all in future years in the plan, but yet some projects are being funded immediately for planning. And it just bothers me that that's happening that way, because I have schools that have been zeroed out here, like Shadyside, which I need to have worked on real soon. I mean, they were ready to go. They were next. And yet money isn't being invested in something that was further down our list of priorities. And I'm assuming that happened because we're waiting for the MGT study. And that just, I don't know, that bothers me because I think we're getting an inconsistent message from the county government that we're waiting for the MGT study, but yet on certain projects, we're not gonna. And I know that's not really a question for you to answer, but I just wanted to put that out there because I think that it's a policy question that very much concerns me. And I think that people should be aware that that's a policy question that is an issue, that we've been told there was agreement by this board, the superintendent, the county council, and the county executive that we would be waiting for the results of the MGT study, and yet we're not waiting for the results of the MGT study. And this board prides itself on having a list that we follow so that we don't play favorites, and yet apparently that isn't always the case. Thank you.
Mrs. Ritchie?
And I understand exactly what Ms. Burge is saying about that, because it does. It looks like it looks political more than it does based on need and so forth. So, but the fact is that they can do a study, and when the MGT study comes back, which is coming back to us within months, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a go. What I think I heard you say, and maybe I'm not wrong, the money that's set aside for the 13th high school, presumably for Crofton, basically what we're doing with that right now is we're looking at whether that land that we have already purchased is actually going to be viable for us to be able to do. Because when we purchased it at the time, as you said, I think I heard you say 40 years ago, that the regulations were different. And the same thing with Old Mill with the BGE, whatever that is that was there. Evidently, it sounds important though. So so we're basically looking at whether it's not whether to construct it, but whether we can even entertain the idea of being able to construct on those two areas, because we make the decision when we do our budget later on whether we're going to even put those schools in there. I mean, we could decide based on MGT, who says no, you don't need it here, you need it here, that we then need to shift the money to start looking at other areas if it says that, or for either of those cases, whether it's for the 13th high school or whether it's for the Old Mill complex. Is that kind of right?
Yes, ma'am, including the important something on the Old Mill property. So the answer to your question directly is absolutely. We in your 6-year plan, and maybe I can sort of loop the comments from Ms. Spurgeon and you back together, Ms. Ritchie. For example, well, let me just tell you point blank. This, Ms. Crawford and I and this board will probably never have a more challenging project in our collective lifetime than Old Mill. It is going to be the biggest thing that any of us are ever going to undertake. So when I was testifying before the county council, I used the term smart money. This is smart money. And for those of you that know me, I don't take spending of money lightly. But this is smart money. We have in our official request in the out year a request for $14 million for property acquisition for Old Mill. We already know, we believe that the property can't adequately support those five buildings. We already know that. To some degree of certainty, but we want it with an engineer's degree of certainty to find out what parts of that property are buildable and not buildable, to take a look at adjacent properties. Some of them are in the public portfolio already, maybe not owned by the board, but maybe owned by other governmental entities, and take a look at privately held properties around the Old Mill complex to see what we might need to support the school. And we can't wait until we have to start the construction of the school to buy the land that same year. So all of this work up front will help us help shape what the ultimate budgets for those projects will have to be, what land we do or don't need to buy sooner rather than later, so that by the time we get there, we're ready, and poised to do that. Similarly, we are very casually under the operating assumption that, oh great, we own property in Crofton, should we build a high school? Wow, we can just go build it right there. Maybe not so fast. So before we create a $100 million-ish budget and go careening.
Did you just say ish?
Ish. And go careening down a path to build a school on that piece of property, wouldn't it, using my words, be smart money to invest a little bit of it up front to confirm that in fact can support that? And the money that we spend today in terms of Old Mill and the money we spend today in terms of Crofton is also smart money, because this is all stuff we would have had to do anyway. So there's no wasted expenditure of public resources. This is a very good expenditure very early on that I think will set all of us up to be able to make good informed decisions on a going forward basis for this next half decade or decade plus. The ultimate timing or the execution of these projects is entirely up to you in terms of setting the priorities, as Ms. Bird said. You set the priorities, and then the funding authorities also have a say, both the state and the county, in the funding mechanisms of it. But I think the information that we get out of these viability studies will put everybody on firmer footing as we look towards making these multi-$100-million investments between the old mill complex and the prospective high school, the 14th high school, because we have Chesapeake Science Point up in the Crofton area.
Well, that's true. And two things. One, I'd like a clip of that ish statement, because I believe I mentioned that one time before and he said I don't do ish. So, so now I've got that. But anyway, but I think you raised an important thing that I never really contemplated when you mentioned that. You mentioned the old mill complex, and typically when we think of that, it's the high school and the two middle schools. But then you also mentioned the elementary school and then the special school that's on there, and I didn't think about that, and I'm really, because they're involved in all of that as well. I mean, that would be
Rippling Woods is in your 6-year plan. It's
Right.
in the same exact trajectory as your two middle schools and the high school.
well, and I think about when I look at when I had the opportunity to visit Ruth Easton. They're doing amazing work in that building. That, and I've said it before, kids can learn in a cardboard box if you've got a great educator in front of them. They don't need a great environment, but a great environment makes education a lot easier. And when I think about the students who are educated at Ruth Parker Easton and what they don't have in that building, and when you go in there and see equipment piled over in corners because they don't have any storage, or they had to use that storage space to be able to make it a classroom, and what they need beyond what a normal, I don't want to say normal, what a typical elementary school would need. So to know that they're included in that is really great, because that's one of those schools that we don't necessarily have a lot of people jumping up and down saying we need to revitalize it. And having gone there and been able to see what amazing things they're doing in that antiquated building, I'm glad that you mentioned that, so thank you.
I don't have any more board questions or comments. Is there any public comment on the capital budget? All right, we have a motion on the floor to approve the superintendent's FY 2016 capital budget. All those in favor? Motion passes 8-0-0. Thank you. The next 5 items are budget-related items. Terms of employment for our different bargaining units. And the first one is item 4.03, terms of employment for Unit 1 employees for fiscal year 2016, which is our TAC unit. And this is an action item. Dr. Arlato, your recommendation, please.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend approval of the terms of employment for Unit 1 employees for fiscal year 2016.
Okay, and we have a staff presentation.
Yes, good morning, Ms. Korbelak, Dr. Arlato, and members of the board. My name is Melissa Rawls, and I am the Director of Employee Relations. I am here today to request your approval of terms of employment for FY 2016 for TAC in employees that are represented by the Teachers Association of Anne Arundel County. As you are aware, the board is continuing to negotiate the terms of a negotiated agreement with TAC at this time. We have not reached a tentative agreement for ratification by TAC and the board. For this reason, it is essential that terms of employment be established for the 2016 year. The terms of employment will continue to be in effect until such time as a successor negotiated agreement is approved and ratified. In brief, the terms of employment for the individuals in TAC will continue the provisions of the current negotiated agreement as amended, except for the following areas. First, there will be no step or longevity salary increases. And there have also been initial approved provisions with TAC that will take effect on July 1st, 2015. Those have been enumerated in the actual terms of employment. I will first like to thank Mr. Jones and Mr. Binford, along with the negotiating team, for the many hours that we have put in during this negotiation session. I believe that there has been substantial effort on both parts on both parties' side to reach an agreement. Upon approval of the terms of employment, the board will continue to negotiate the terms of the negotiated agreement that will become effective on July 1st, 2015, which will also include compensation enhancements as well as the other provisions that we have been unable to reach an agreement with, with thus far. And I ask that you support the terms of employment.
I just want to make sure that people, because when you first said no steps or longevity increases, that's going to be the thing that people are going to hear, and now they're going to be running off saying they're not going to give us a step, they're not going to give an increase. This means that until we reach the agreement, the compensation piece is not going to be negotiated. It has to be negotiated. We can't just put anything arbitrarily in here.
Correct.
So there is anticipation that something will be there. We just can't do it now because we haven't finished negotiations.
Correct.
Okay.
There had been an initial placeholder in the board's budget for a step increase, and based upon the budget recommended by the county executive and then subsequently by the county council, there has, as we've had an extensive conversation today about the additional funding that has been recommended for employee enhancements. The board has not had an opportunity to negotiate those funds and how that would be allocated for Unit 1 employees thus far, and so that conversation still needs to take place. So as it relates to the terms of employment, there will not be an immediate enhancement placed for that will take effect on July 1st. However, once negotiations have been completed, that funding will then be retroactively effective for July 1.
Yeah, so I just didn't want people to freak out and go, we're not getting any money, they gave us this money. That's not it. This is terms of employment and not the negotiated agreement.
Correct.
Is there any public comment on this item? Okay. All those in favor? Motion passes 800. Item 4.04 is the terms of employment for Unit 2 employees, which is AEL. Dr. Arlato, your recommendation, please.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend approval of the terms of employment for Unit 2 employees for fiscal year 2016.
And there's a presentation.
Yes, thank you. Similarly, as I just outlined, there has been ongoing negotiations with AEL since the beginning of this year. At this time, there has not been a ratified ratified agreement that has been reached by the board and AEL, and for this reason it is essential again that terms of employment be issued for the FY 2016 year. In brief, the terms of employment as it relates for AEL will also include no step or longevity salary increases at this time, and also no performance pay for Unit 2 members. I would also like to thank Mr. Kovalent, Mr. Harine, and Mr. Myers, along with the bargaining team for their participation in trying to work through these difficult issues that we have had this year, and we'll continue to negotiate the terms of an agreement to take effect on July 1, 2015, which will also include compensation enhancements as well as other provisions that have yet not been determined. And any enhancement will become retroactive July 1, 2015.
I don't have any board comments or questions. Is there any public comment? All those in favor? Motion passes 8-0-0. The next item on the agenda is 4.05. This is the terms of employment for Unit 3 employees for fiscal year 2016, which is our AFSCME unit. And this is an action item. Dr. Arlato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend approval of the terms of employment for Unit 3 employees for fiscal year 2016.
Second.
And presentation.
Thank you. The negotiating teams for the Board of Education and AFSCME have not yet reached a tentative agreement for ratification for the FY 2016 year. For this reason, we are requesting that terms of employment be established for FY 16. In brief, the terms of employment for AFSCME employees will include no step or longevity salary increases until such time through continued negotiations a tentative agreement which will be ratified by AFSCME and the board has been reached. And that would include compensation enhancements as well as the other outstanding provisions that are currently being negotiated. I do want to take time to acknowledge Mr. Blake and Mr. Johnson and the rest of the bargaining team for their great work that we've been doing thus far in working towards reaching a tentative agreement for the FY 2016 year.
I don't have any board comments or questions. Is there any public comment on this item? All those in favor? Motion passes 8-0-0. Item 4.06, terms of employment for Unit 4 SAAC employees for fiscal year 2016. This is an action item. Dr. Arlato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend approval of the terms of employment for Unit 4 employees for fiscal year 2016.
Second.
And a presentation?
Yes, the board and the Secretaries and Assistants Association of Anne Arundel County have actually reached a tentative agreement for the FY16 year. However, it has not been ratified. And for those reasons, we would like to issue terms of employment as well. The terms of employment for SAAC employees would require the continuation of the provisions of the current negotiated agreement as amended, except for the area of compensation. At this time, there would be no step or longevity salary increases provided for SAAC employees. There have also been an initial approved provision that is included in the terms of employment, which is specified within that document, which will take effect on July 1, 2015. The SAAC team members and the board will continue to negotiate as it specifically relates to compensation, and at such time in which an agreement is reached, those provisions which would relate to a compensation enhancement will take effect on July 1, 2015. I want to thank Mr. Darjan and Ms. Dotson, along with the remaining team members, for their hard work that we have done this year. I believe that we reached a tentative agreement that includes provisions that are beneficial to the members, which are employees of Anne Arundel County Public Schools as well.
Dr. Frank.
Thank you. I understand you've apparently reached an agreement, but it hasn't been ratified yet. Do you have any idea about when it might be ratified?
I have been in consultation with Mr. Darjan. I know that we have a meeting scheduled on June 24th to discuss compensation, and hopefully we will be able to reach an agreement related to that provision. It is my understanding that once the compensation component of the negotiated agreement has been finalized, that the entire tentative agreement will be presented to SAAC for a vote by their membership, and so that will be ratified at that time. Upon ratification by SAAC, then the board will move forward to vote and ratify the agreement. So hopefully by the next board meeting, if not, then we would ideally hope that it would be ratified at the August meeting.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Is there any public comment on this item? All those in favor? Motion passes 800. Item 4.07 is terms of employment for Unit 5 and 6 employees for fiscal year 2016. Dr. Arlato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend approval of the terms of employment for Unit 5 and Unit 6 employees for fiscal year 2016.
Second.
No presentation.
Yes, the current terms of employment will continue in effect for the 2015-2016 school year for Unit 5 and Unit 6 employees. As a result of ongoing budgetary consideration, no step or longevity increases are provided at this time. However, any compensation enhancement that is decided at a later date will be awarded retroactively to employees in Units 5 and 6 effective July 1, 2015.
Is there any public comment on this item? All those in favor? Motion passes 800. I'd just like to take a minute to thank you for all your hard work in your new role this year. Getting to this point, I know there's a little ways to go, but we very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is 5.02. The Carrie Whedon Science Center Foundation lease extension. This is an information to action item. Do I have a motion to move this from information to action?
Second.
All those in favor? Motion passes 800. Dr. Arlato, your recommendation, please.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend approval of the Carrie Whedon Science Center Foundation Incorporated lease extension.
We don't have a presentation. I don't have any board questions. Is there any public comment on this item? All those in favor? Motion passes 800. The next item is 5.03, the North Glen, Odenton, and Woodside Elementary School Pre-K Kindergarten Edition Educational Specification. This is an information to action item. Do I have a motion to move this from information to action? All those in favor? We now have an action item. Dr. Arlato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend the approval of the North Glen, Odenton, and Woodside Elementary Schools Pre-K and Kindergarten Edition educational specifications.
Second.
Are there any board questions or comments? Is there any public comment? All those in favor? Motion passes 800. Item 5.04 is Chesapeake High School Open Space Enclosure Educational Specification. This is an information to action item. Do I have a motion to move this from information to action?
Second.
All those in favor? We now have an action item. Dr. Arlato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend approval of the Chesapeake High School Open Space Enclosure Educational Specification.
Do I have any board questions or comments? Any public comment? All those in favor? Motion passes 800. We're now on to consent items. Items 6.01 to 6.10, award of contracts. Do I have a motion to bundle these and move them from information to action? All those in favor? We now have an action item. Dr. Arlato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend the Board of Education award contracts as listed on today's agenda, 6.01 through 6.10 inclusive.
So moved.
Is there any board comment or questions? Is there any public comment? All those in favor? Motion passes, or abstain? Opposed? Favor, okay. Motion passes 8-0-0. I just have a couple of announcements. The Board Budget Committee will meet briefly today, supposedly right now, so whenever we're done, in this room. And the next Board of Education meeting is Wednesday, July 8th at 10 a.m. Mrs. Nally.
I'd like to move that the board goes into closed session to consult with counsel to obtain legal advice on a legal matter and to conduct collective bargaining negotiations or consider matters that relate to the negotiations.
All those in favor? All right. Motion passes 8-0-0. This portion of our meeting is adjourned.